Somewhere beyond your reach, another version of you may be existing right now, someone who made a different choice in the very moment when you once hesitated. Welcome to Drift into Quiet Knowing. Tonight, as every sound begins to soften and the outside world slowly fades away, we will step into a question that is both strange and deeply personal. Is there another version of you living a different life? Maybe that person said the words you once held back. Maybe that person boarded the train you once missed. Maybe that person is living in another house, loving someone else, waking up beneath another sky, and carrying memories in their heart that you have never had. Science does not say for certain that this is true. But in quantum mechanics, in theories about the multiverse, and in the way human consciousness is always haunted by the paths we did not take, that question still opens quietly, like a door in the dark. If every choice once created a road, if every possibility once had a moment when it was allowed to exist, then perhaps your life is not just one single straight line. Perhaps it is a deep forest of paths that were never walked, and if you stay until the end of this journey, you will not only hear about parallel worlds, branching realities, and dreams that feel like memories from another life. You may also come to understand why on certain nights we remember something that never happened, why we grieve for a person we never became, and why the version of you who is quietly breathing in this very moment is more precious than you may realize. Now, relax your shoulders, let your breathing slow down, let your mind settle like the surface of a lake beneath the moonlight. Think about one major turning point in your life, then gently place this question into the quiet darkness of tonight. If there is another version of you living a different life, is that version dreaming of you? When we talk about another version of ourselves, perhaps we do not begin with equations in a laboratory, and we do not begin with distant galaxies beyond the darkness. We begin with a very small, very human moment, sometimes just a sudden question at the end of the day, what if I had chosen differently back then? Maybe that question has come to you before on a quiet evening, when the room had gone dim, when everything from the day had settled, and your mind began travelling backward to places your body could never return to. You remember a road, you remember a voice, you remember some rainy day, some doorway, some chance that passed through your life almost silently. At the time, you may not have thought it was a major turning point. You may have only thought you were making an ordinary decision. But years later, when you look back, you suddenly realize that some moments are so small, they are almost invisible, yet they quietly divide a life into two sides. The side you lived and the side you can only imagine. A person can live an entire life with many clear memories, but sometimes the thing that keeps them awake is not what happened. It is what never happened. A job they did not take, a trip they did not begin, a phone call they never made, an apology they held back for too long, a love they let go of and later could never hold again. Those things have no real shape in the physical world, but inside the mind they still carry a strange weight. They are not events, but they feel like the shadows of events. They do not belong to the history of your life, and yet they still appear on the nights when you stare at the ceiling and wonder, if I had been a little braver, a little softer, or a little wiser back then, would I still be me now? It is from that quiet place that the idea of another version of you begins to feel so compelling. Not because we know for certain that a copy of you exists somewhere, but because in the human mind, the possibilities we never lived do not completely disappear. They are like locked rooms in an old house. You no longer walk into them, but sometimes you still remember very clearly how cold the doorknob felt, what the light behind the crack in the door looked like, and what you felt in your heart as you stood before it. Some choices cannot be reopened once they have passed, but the memory of the moment of choosing remains, like a very thin crease on the page of a human life. Imagine a man who has already passed the halfway point of his life. He has a roof over his head, a familiar chair, a habit of making coffee in the morning, and a few old photographs tucked away in a drawer. His life is not exactly sad. It is just quiet. But sometimes, on a very ordinary afternoon, he remembers a year when he was young, when there was a job application letter he had finished writing but never sent. That letter no longer matters to anyone. The company may have changed its name, the interviewer may have retired, that city may have changed so much that he would not recognize it anymore. But in his mind, that unsent letter is still a door. He's not only regretting a job, he is seeing another version of himself, someone who might have lived somewhere else, had different friends, different habits, different failures, and maybe on this very afternoon is remembering a life that he himself never lived. Or imagine a woman who has passed through many birthdays. She's no longer the girl who once stood in front of a train station with a small suitcase, but in one very quiet corner of her memory, she can still see herself back then, hand resting on the handle of the suitcase, eyes fixed on the train schedule, heart torn between leaving and staying. She stayed, then life continued. She met the people she needed to meet, lost the things she had to lose, and did the things she had to do. But every now and then, when she hears the sound of a train in the distance, she wonders about the girl who boarded that train in another possibility. How did that girl grow old? Was she happier? Was she lonelier? Did she ever remember the woman who stayed? That question does not need to be answered with certainty. Sometimes just asking it is enough to light up a very deep part of being human. Because what troubles us is not only the outcome. What troubles us is the feeling that we once stood before many different lives, but in the end we were allowed to step into only one. We do not hurt because everything went wrong. Many times we hurt because we can never know what the other things would have become. That unknown is as soft as mist, but it is also as wide as an ocean inside the heart. Psychology calls this kind of thinking counterfactual thinking, meaning the mind imagines an outcome different from what actually happened. Human beings often do this after important decisions, after a loss, or after realizing that one small action might have led to a very different result. When we tell ourselves, "If only I had done something different back then," we are not only daydreaming, we are letting the mind build an alternate version of our life, like a model in the dark to compare, to learn, to understand pain, or sometimes simply to find some meaning in what has passed. The strange thing is that the ability to imagine another life can make us sadder, but it is also part of how human beings grow. We look at the road we did not take so we can understand more deeply the road we did take. But in a video like this, the important thing is that we do not use that question to make old wounds hurt more. We do not return to the past in order to blame ourselves. We return very gently, like stepping into a room where someone is sleeping. We walk slowly, speak softly, and look at everything with compassion. Because the past version of you did not know everything you know today. That person chose with the understanding they had then, with the fear they had then, with the hope they had then, and with the limits they had then. If that person stayed silent, maybe speaking was too hard at the time. If that person left, maybe staying hurt too much. If that person stayed, maybe leaving was too frightening. Every choice is born from a very real person, in a very real moment, with a heart that does not have a complete map of the future. And this is where the question about another version of you begins to become softer. We no longer ask it like an accusation. We ask it like a small lamp. If there is another version of you who chose differently, that person is not necessarily happier. That person is simply different. That person may also have sleepless nights. That person may also have regrets of their own. That person may also look back at some moment and imagine you, the version who followed this path. Perhaps in some imagined reality that person is wondering, what if I had not left back then? What if I had sent a different letter back then? What if I had chosen safety instead of something new back then? And in that way, every version of a human life, whether real or only an image in the mind, may carry the same secret sorrow. No one gets to live every possibility. Notice this very slowly. In life, we often imagine that only the present version of ourselves has something to regret. We look toward the path we did not take and think that it must be brighter over there. But the human mind is very quick to colour the roads that were lost. The things we never lived often seem cleaner in the imagination, because they were never soaked by rain, never covered in dust, and never filled with ordinary exhausting days. A love that never worked out can remain beautiful forever, because it never had to pay bills with us, care for sickness, go through misunderstandings, or survive silence. A job we did not take can keep shining forever because we never had to live with its pressure. A city we never moved to can remain romantic forever because we were never there on lonely mornings. Another version of you, if built only from regret, will often look more beautiful than the truth. But if that person truly lived, they too would have to live a life with weight, limits, and scars of their own. So the deeper question is not, is the other version better than me? The deeper question is, why do I always feel that a part of me was left behind at those crossroads? The answer may lie in the way memory creates identity. Human beings do not remember only to know what happened. We remember to know who we are. Autobiographical memories, meaning the memories of our own personal lives, help the mind connect scattered pieces into one continuous story. You're not only the body lying here. You're also the child who was once afraid of the dark, the young person who once believed in a dream, the adult who once suffered loss, the person who learned how to stay silent, and the person who learned how to stand up again. Each memory is like a thread. When those threads are woven together, they create the feeling of "this is me." But if the self is a story, then the unwritten chapters can also haunt us. We're not only shaped by what happened, we're also shaped by what we think might have happened. A person who once missed the chance to study something they loved may carry that longing for many years. That longing may make them sad, but it may also make them teach their child to listen more closely to their dreams. A person who once did not say, "I love you," may live with that silence for a long time, but later, that very silence may make them more tender when they still have a chance to say something kind to someone else. A person who once chose the safer road may sometimes imagine a more adventurous version of themselves, but that same safe choice may also have given someone a home, a meal, and a steady presence that another person needed. In every choice, loss and gain always lie very close together, like two sides of a leaf. Maybe you have had a day like that too. Just an ordinary day, but later it keeps appearing like a strange bright point in your memory. Maybe it was the day you watched someone walk away and did not call them back. Maybe it was the day you received a message and did not answer right away. Maybe it was the day you said, "later," and that later never came. When the event happened, it was so small that you did not hear the sound of a door closing. But time has a strange way of enlarging the meaning of certain moments. It does not change the past, but it changes the light that falls on the past. Years later, you look back and realize, maybe that was where my life turned. And right at that point, the story of another version of you becomes a story about being gentle with yourself. Because if we keep thinking our life should have been more perfect, we will live like someone who is always standing at the train platform after the train has already left. But if we understand that every life is only one possibility among many, we can begin to look at the present version of ourselves with different eyes. You're not a failure of the things you did not choose. You're the living result of everything you chose, endured, learned, lost, kept, forgave, and are still continuing. Some older people say that when they were young, they thought their lives would follow a very clear path. They would love one person, do one kind of work, live in one place, and become exactly the person they imagined. But the longer people live, the more they realize that life is not like a straight road drawn with a ruler. It is more like a river. Some parts are wide, some are narrow, some are bright, some are cloudy, and some pass over hidden rocks while the surface stays still. Every decision is a small current joining the larger flow. And when we look back, we cannot separate each drop of water and ask which one created the bend. We can only see that the whole river has carried us here. A person may wonder, what if I had married someone else? What if I had not had children? What if I had had one more child? What if I had taken care of my health earlier? What if I had left that workplace sooner? What if I had been a little more patient? These are not small questions. They touch the deepest pillars of a human life: love, family, time, the body, freedom, responsibility, safety, and meaning. So when a person thinks about another version of themselves, they're really thinking about the most sacred parts of life. They're not just asking about one choice. They're asking about the entire shape of one human existence. And yet, if we sit with those questions long enough, we may see that they do not bring only regret, they also bring gratitude. Try looking around your current life in that way. Maybe there are things you could not choose. Maybe there are things that hurt you, but there are also encounters that could only have happened on this path. There are people who only know you because you followed this road. There are lessons that only came because you were wrong in this particular place. There are qualities in you, like patience, compassion, caution, and endurance, that were formed precisely because of the imperfect roads. If you changed one old decision, you might also change the people who loved you, the moments that saved you, and the understanding that made you deeper. At this point, Another version of you is no longer a silent rival. That person is not proof that you lived incorrectly. That person is more like a gentle shadow standing at the edge of your awareness, reminding you that life is fragile, full of branches, and deeply precious. Every morning you wake up, you're continuing the one branch you can directly feel. In this branch, you have this breath, these hands, this room, these scars, the people who once passed through your life, the sorrows that made you softer, and the small joys that helped you stay. No matter how many possibilities may exist somewhere, the version hearing these words is still the only version you can care for right now. Maybe someday, when night falls and your mind begins opening old drawers, you will meet those what-if questions again. What if I had told the truth back then? What if I had left back then? What if I had stayed back then? What if I had been braver back then? When they appear, you do not have to push them away immediately. Let them sit beside you like tired guests. Listen to them, but do not let them take the wheel of your entire soul. They can tell you what once mattered. They can remind you of a forgotten dream. They can help you live the rest of your life with more awareness. But they do not have the right to say that your life only has value if it had followed another path. In that deeply human truth, we begin to see something almost spiritual, without needing to move away from science. Each human being is a collection of probabilities that became memories. Before a choice happens, many possibilities are open. After the choice happens, one possibility becomes life. But the other possibilities do not completely die inside the mind. They become lessons, dreams, longing, intuition, caution, and late-blooming courage. There are lives you did not live with your body, but you lived them through imagination. You passed through them during long nights, in the moments when you wondered, and in the silences when you looked back, and in a very gentle way they also helped create you. Remember the image of a forest. Each tree is a possible path of life. You're walking only one trail, but around you, the leaves of other paths are still rustling. One path may lead to a warmer home. One path may lead to a colder emptiness. One path may look beautiful from far away but be full of thorns once you step into it. One path may have frightened you, but it may also have given you freedom. We do not know. And because we do not know, the human mind creates stories. But also because we do not know, we have the chance to learn something very deep. When we cannot know all the lives we might have lived, we can live the present life with a gentler awareness. Maybe that is why the question, is there another version of you living a different life, is not only a question about the multiverse. It is a question about compassion for yourself. If that other version exists, we wish them peace. If that version is only an image in memory, we still wish them peace. Because that person represents the possibilities that once truly existed inside us. That person is the one who wanted to leave, the one who wanted to stay, the one who wanted to speak, the one who wanted to remain silent, and the one who wanted to begin again. Inside every present human being, many unformed people are sleeping. And when we stop blaming them, we also stop blaming ourselves. Tonight, we do not need to go immediately into the deeper layers of quantum mechanics or the universes beyond observation. Before looking up at the galaxies, look at something closer. The human heart has the ability to hold unlived lives. It can carry a city never visited, a career never tried, a person never loved in time, a word never spoken, a piece of music never learned, and a letter never sent. But the heart also has the ability to do something more beautiful, to turn the things we did not live into understanding, to turn regret into tenderness, and to turn the question, what if, into the question, from now on, how can I live more deeply? So when you think about another version of yourself, do not look at that person only as someone who has everything you lost. Look at that person as a mirror. In that mirror, you see that life is wider than one choice. You see that you're not fixed like a statue, but soft like light on the surface of water. You have already been many people within one life. You have been the person who did not know, the person who hoped, the person who was wrong, the person who endured, the person who forgave, the person who began again. And maybe, in this very moment, as you listen to this story, you're becoming another version of yourself, one who knows how to look at the past more slowly, more gently, and with less cruelty toward yourself. If you wake up tomorrow and still remember this question, perhaps hold it like a small stone in the palm of your hand, not too heavy, not too sharp, Let it remind you that every day you are still alive is a place where possibilities have not completely closed. You cannot go back and send the old letter, but you can write a new one. You cannot board the train from years ago, but you can open a door today. You cannot become every version you might once have been, but you can treat the version who is here more kindly. And sometimes that is the greatest miracle of all, not finding another copy of yourself in some distant universe, but realizing that in this very life, you can still become someone a little gentler, a little truer, and a little freer. From the crossroads inside the human heart, we begin to step more slowly into a deeper region of reality. There, the question, "What if I had chosen differently back then?" is no longer only a personal ache. It begins to touch something stranger. The physical world itself, at the smallest level we know, does not always behave like a road that has already been drawn. In everyday life, when a cup is on the table, we say it is on the table. When a door is open, we say it is open. When someone has left, we say that person is no longer there. The familiar world around us seems very clear, very solid, very orderly, with one thing coming before another. But when science moves down to the level of atoms, electrons, photons, and very tiny particles, reality begins to seem less like a stone wall and more like a mist. It no longer speaks only in the sentence, "This is what happened." It speaks in the language of possibility. This does not mean your life is a dream, or that the chair beneath your body is only an illusion. No. At the human scale, the world is still stable enough for us to live, breathe, touch the hand of someone we love, walk across a room, open a door, cook a meal, and write a letter. But at the very small scale, where matter no longer looks like the familiar picture we carry in our eyes, quantum mechanics shows that physical systems can be described by many possibilities at once, before a measurement produces one specific result. A particle is not simply like a tiny marble sitting firmly at one point, waiting for us to see it. In the mathematics of quantum mechanics, it is described by a state connected to probability. To put it gently, before a result appears, nature does not seem to tell the story in one single line, but in a collection of things that could happen. Imagine a tiny drop of dew resting on the edge of a leaf in the early morning. In ordinary life, when the drop falls, it will land in a certain place. But before it falls, if we do not know the direction of the wind, the angle of the leaf, or the vibration of the air, we can imagine many different paths. This is only an everyday image to help the mind slow down, not actual quantum mechanics. In the quantum world, the strangeness goes much deeper. The issue is not only that we do not know where the particle is. According to the way quantum theory describes it, the state of the system itself can be a superposition of many possibilities, and measurement plays a very important role in the result we receive. In other words, nature at the smallest level does not always appear as one single answer before we ask it through a measurement. It is here that a strange question begins to open. When we measure, why do we see only one result? If there were many possibilities in the quantum description before that, what happens to the other possibilities? Do they truly disappear? Were they never real? Or, in a way that is very hard to imagine, do they continue to exist in other branches of reality? This is where the many worlds interpretation enters, not as a ghost story, not as a mystical claim, but as a serious way to understand the measurement problem in quantum mechanics. According to this interpretation, when a quantum system has many possible outcomes, instead of only one possibility becoming real while the others are erased, all of the possibilities may continue, but in different branches that no longer interact with one another in the familiar way. At this point, the mind can easily jump straight to a fascinating image. In another branch, there is someone like you who chose a different job, stayed with a different person, moved to a different city, and lived a different life. But we need to move very slowly. Science does not allow us to say with certainty that an everyday copy of you is sitting in another kitchen, drinking another cup of tea, listening to another song. The many worlds interpretation is one way of understanding the quantum foundation of reality, and the question of how microscopic branches relate to the macroscopic world of human choices is extremely complex. We should not turn a deep scientific hypothesis into an easy promise. But the most beautiful part of it is not that it gives us a definite answer. The most beautiful part is that it reminds us reality may be wider than our everyday intuition, and that what we call only one result may not be the only way to think about the world. Imagine you are standing in a quiet room with a small lamp on the table. The light shines on only one part of the room, so you can see the table, the book, your own hand, and the wall in front of you. But the part of the room outside the light does not stop existing just because of that. It is simply outside the area you are currently seeing. This image is not proof of many worlds, but it helps us feel something. What consciousness recognizes may be only one slice of something larger. In everyday life, we experience only one result. The letter was sent or not sent. The trip began or did not begin. The words were spoken or held back. But in deeper thought, especially when quantum mechanics speaks of possibilities before measurement, we can ask ourselves, is the life we are aware of only one branch lighting up among countless possibilities that once opened? To avoid getting lost in mystery, hold on to one very strong thread. Science here is not saying that every thought you have instantly creates a new universe in a simple sense. It also does not say that whenever you regret something, another world automatically appears to fix it. Statements like that sound attractive, but they too easily turn science into cheap mythology. A more accurate way to say it, and also a deeper one, is this. Quantum mechanics shows that at the foundational level, nature is described through probability, superposition, and the measurement problem. The many worlds interpretation is one possible explanation, suggesting that different outcomes are not erased, but belong to different branches of reality. From there, human beings are allowed to ask a powerful philosophical question. If nature can contain possibilities this deeply, then is my present self also only one path illuminated by consciousness? Quietly, that question brings us back to ourselves. The you of the present is the result of countless things that have happened: genetics, environment, body, memory, time period, love, loss, habits, opportunities that arrived at the right moment, and doors that closed too soon. Every second of your life, the world moved in one direction and not another. You did not notice most of those crossroads because they were too small. A friend called on the exact day you were about to give up. A book happened to be on a shelf and taught you something new. An illness changed the way you saw your body. Being late caused you to meet, or not meet, someone. Life does not only turn at the big decisions, it also turns in moments so tiny that no one marks them on a calendar. If we borrow the language of quantum mechanics carefully, not to make a claim, but to reflect, we might say this: human life is also full of states that have not yet taken shape. Before you say an important sentence, many versions of the future are standing very close together. You can tell the truth, you can stay silent, you can avoid the moment, you can smile softly and let it pass. After the sentence is spoken or held back, one specific stream of life continues. The other streams withdraw into the unseen region of the mind and become what if. And even though those what ifs are not quantum branches in the strict physical sense, they have a very real psychological life. They follow you, teach you, sometimes hurt you, and sometimes make you wiser. Think of an evening many years ago. Someone sits beside a phone, looking at a name on the screen. They can answer or let it ring until it becomes silent, only a few seconds. But inside those few seconds are many possibilities for a human life. If they answer, maybe a conversation will save a relationship. If they do not answer, maybe the silence will stretch on for years. If they respond with anger, the story turns in one direction. If they respond with honesty, it turns in another. Everyday life does not show us all the results. It lets us live only one result. And precisely because we are allowed to live only one result, human beings carry within them the feeling of other lives that never fully formed. Quantum mechanics also offers a humble lesson for human intuition. We often believe reality must be like the way our grown human brains organize it. Clear, certain, this object here, that object there, this thing happened, that thing did not happen. But the brain evolved to help us survive in the large-scale world, where stones fall downward, fire heats the skin, food must be found, and danger must be avoided. Our intuition is very useful for living, but it is not always the final ruler of reality. When science looks into layers that are too small, too fast, or too far away, intuition is often surpassed. Just as the Earth seems flat beneath our feet but is actually curved, And just as the sun seems to move around us but the Earth is actually turning, the physical world seems completely solid, but at the quantum level, it is described in a far stranger language. And this is the point that makes this subject both scientific and almost spiritual. Spiritual, in the gentlest and cleanest sense, does not necessarily mean believing in something without evidence. It can mean the ability to stand before the unknown with reverence. When quantum mechanics says that the foundation of matter is not as simple as the table in front of us, it does not ask us to abandon reason. It invites us to become humble. It says reality is deeper than the habits of human perception. It reminds us that some things truly operate in ways that everyday language can barely grasp. And in that space, between what science can describe and what the soul can feel, the question of another version of you begins to ring like a bell from very far away. If there are many branches of reality according to the many worlds interpretation, then each branch would not be like a room right next door where you could simply knock. They are not worlds you can enter by walking through a mirror to meet yourself. In the common understanding, those branches do not interact in a way that would allow us to send letters, make phone calls, or step into another life. This makes the story less magical in the cinematic sense, but more profound. Because if the branches cannot touch, then each version, if it exists, lives in the private solitude of its own branch. They would not know you. You would not know them. Each person would have only one stream of consciousness lighting up from within, one private chain of memories, one private history, one private feeling of I am me. That makes the question even stranger. If there is another version of you, but you cannot meet, cannot remember, and cannot communicate with that person, is that person still you? Or are they only someone with the same starting point, gradually moving farther away through every choice, every day, every pain, and every joy? The same seed planted in two different soils will not become two completely identical trees. A tree growing in strong sunlight will reach in one direction. A tree growing in heavy wind will lean differently. A tree with branches cut early will carry a different shape. If there is another version of you in some distant branch, that person may begin very close to you, but the longer they live, the more they become a private mystery. They are not only another you, they are another story written from the same first letter. And if we think very slowly, we will see that we are already like that in this life. You do not need a parallel universe to have other versions of yourself. The child who was once you has disappeared in terms of body and time, but still remains in very small reactions. The young person who was once you is no longer fully intact, but still speaks when you hear an old song. The wounded person within you may still shrink back when someone says something cold. The hopeful person within you may still open their eyes when they see the morning light. You are a flow with many layers, and each layer was once a real version of you. So when science speaks of many possibilities in reality, it accidentally meets something the soul has known for a long time. A human being is never a fixed point. A human being is a history that continues branching inside memory. A physicist may look at an equation and speak of the wave function, superposition, measurement, probability, and branching. An ordinary person near the end of life may look at their own hands and say, I lived one life, but inside me are traces of many other lives. Those two languages are not the same, but in this video they meet in a very quiet place. That place does not need to claim too much. It only needs to let us ask, if the physical world can be deeper than what the eye sees, if the human self can contain more possibilities than history has recorded, then is the present version of us rarer than we realize? Let us return to the image of a falling leaf, but this time let us look at it more slowly. The leaf separates from the branch one afternoon. A gentle wind blows. It leans to the left, turns once and lands on the ground. To someone passing by, only one thing happened. The leaf fell there. But if we stop for a moment, we can sense that countless small things contributed to that landing point. The direction of the wind, the humidity, the shape of the leaf, a vibration in the branch, a very soft current of air from someone's footsteps. If just one factor had been a little different, the leaf might have landed somewhere else. Human life is the same. We often tell our own story as though everything had to lead inevitably to today, but in truth, so many things could have been different. And that very fragility makes the present feel sacred. Quantum mechanics does not need to be used to decorate every ordinary event in life. We should not say that choosing what to eat in the morning definitely creates another world where you eat something else. But as a source of philosophical inspiration, It helps us remember that nature is not always confined by the way we are used to thinking. It softens the arrogance of intuition. It opens a small crack in the door so we can look at our lives with wonder. There may be no way to know whether the possibilities that did not happen exist somewhere, but we know one thing for certain. They have existed inside us as imagination, regret, hope, and lesson. They have shaped the way we continue living. After a great loss, some people often say, "I'm not myself anymore." That sentence is deeply true. A life-changing event can close an old version of us. But if we look through the lens of branching lives, we can say it more gently. One branch of you has ended, and another branch is learning how to keep growing. When a person loses someone they love, the world does not only lose one person, it also loses the future in which that person should have been present. Meals that were never cooked, phone calls that never happened, birthdays that never arrived, stories that were never told. The pain of loss is so deep because it does not only grieve the past, it also grieves the future branches that have closed. But inside that very pain, human beings sometimes begin to live out the love that remains. They care for others more gently. They say loving words sooner. They look at an ordinary day with more grateful eyes. A new version of them is born, not from joy, but from the truth that life is too fragile to delay everything that matters. This brings us back to the central point of this journey. Maybe no one can prove that another version of you is living another life, but the ability to think about it already reveals something very deep. The present version of you is not obvious or guaranteed. You are a convergence. You are the meeting point of probability, memory, biology, time, choice, and things beyond your control. You are the branch that lit up. You are the path consciousness is walking. And so, instead of only asking whether another version exists, we can ask a more necessary question. If this version is the only branch I can touch, how will I care for it? A person can spend many years regretting the road not taken, but there comes a moment when they suddenly realize that regret also needs to be set down so the present can breathe. Not because the past does not matter, but because the past has completed its task. It brought us here. The unlived possibilities have also completed their task. They taught us what was once precious, what once frightened us, and what still wants to be rescued in the rest of our life. If you have ever dreamed of a braver version of yourself, maybe that is a reminder that today you can still speak a little more honestly. If you have ever dreamed of a more peaceful version of yourself, maybe that is a reminder that today you can still put down one small burden. If you have ever dreamed of a more loving version of yourself, maybe that is a reminder that a phone call, an apology, or a held hand can still happen in this branch of life. And right here, quantum mechanics becomes closer to the heart than we may think, not because it proves every dream, but because it teaches us humility before possibility. Before a result appears, many things are possible. Before a word is spoken, many futures are possible. Before a day ends, there is still a small space for us to choose how to be present. We do not need to exaggerate that into magic. The truth is already miraculous enough. A very small change in the way you speak to yourself tonight can make tomorrow lighter. One act of self-forgiveness can open a new psychological branch. One decision to care for your body can change the next 10 years. One moment of pausing before anger can save a relationship from a long crack. The branches of life are not only things to imagine in a distant universe, they are also very small possibilities waiting in the way you continue to live. Maybe that is why the idea of many branches of reality is not only fascinating to scientists and philosophers, but also touches people who have lain awake in the dark. It speaks through a very deep symbol. What happened is not the whole land of possibility. We can respect the truth of our lives while still acknowledging that beneath it lies a great sea of what could have been. That sea sometimes makes us sad because we cannot swim in every direction. But that sea also humbles us because we understand that every shore our feet touch is something rare. To live one life, even an imperfect one, is still to witness a branch of reality that no imagined version can live in our place. So when we mention the many worlds interpretation, let us hear it like an echo from very far away, not as a final answer. It does not come to tell you that somewhere there is definitely someone like you correcting every mistake. It comes to remind us that reality has deep layers we do not fully understand. It comes to make the question of the self wider. Who am I? If I could once have been many other people, what am I? If one choice can turn an entire life in another direction? And how should I live if each ordinary second can also be the beginning of a new branch in the soul? Let that question settle very slowly. You do not need to answer immediately. You also do not need to believe in anything beyond the evidence. Just lie still for a moment and feel the strangeness of your own existence. In this breathing body, there are atoms that have passed through many forms of matter. In this memory, there are days that have vanished and days that still shine. In this heart, there are people who came, people who left, and people who left traces behind. In this consciousness, there is a life story being told from the inside, one sentence at a time, one breath at a time. And whether or not other branches of reality exist, this branch still has you. It is opening right now in the quiet of the night, in the gentle question that perhaps you do not need to live every possible life. Perhaps you only need to live this one with more awareness. If we look that deeply, the quantum world does not make life feel cold, it makes life feel more fragile and more mysterious. One tiny particle can make scientists debate for generations about what measurement truly means. One small result can make philosophy ask again what reality is. And one small choice in your life can lead your soul into another season. Very small things are not small at all. They are turning points of the unknown. They are where the invisible begins to become visible. They are where possibility, at some moment, becomes life. So if tonight you think of another version of yourself, think of that person gently. Maybe that person is only a thought. Maybe that person is a symbol. Maybe, in some deep interpretation of reality, that person is a branch you will never touch. But whatever that person is, they are pointing toward the same thing. Your life has had many doors, and you have walked through some of them. The doors that remain do not need to become a prison of regret. They can become small lamps, reminding you that from now on, while you still can choose with more awareness, more compassion, and less fear. And perhaps in the quietest moment, when thought begins to fade like moonlight on the curtains, you will feel something very peaceful. You do not need to know the entire map of the universe to understand the value of the step you're taking now. You do not need to prove there are countless worlds to know that every choice deserves to be treated with care. You do not need to find a more perfect version of yourself somewhere far away. The version who is here, listening, breathing more slowly, learning to forgive what has passed, is already something rare. And if reality truly has more branches than we imagine, then at least in this branch tonight you can be a little gentler with yourself. From the quiet branches of the quantum world, let us slowly look up, like someone who has just lifted their eyes from a tiny speck of dust in the lamplight and begun to gaze at the night sky. Because the question of another version of you does not live only in the deep layer of the atom. It also echoes far out there, among galaxies, vast stretches of darkness, and the final boundary of what human beings can observe. If at the smallest level, matter can be described by many possibilities before one result appears, then at the largest level, the universe also places before us an almost similar question. Is everything we see the whole of reality, or only the small, bright portion that light has had time to bring back to us? When we look up at the sky on a clear night, we feel as if we are looking directly at the universe. But in truth, we are not seeing the universe as it is in the same moment. We are seeing old traces of light. Light from the moon takes a very short amount of time to reach our eyes. Light from the sun takes about 8 minutes to reach Earth. Light from farther stars may have travelled for dozens, hundreds, thousands, or even millions of years before touching the retina of a human being standing quietly beneath the night sky. Every star is not only a point of light, it is a very old letter from time. Some stars we see may have changed long ago, but their old light is still reaching us, like the voice of someone who has gone far away while the echo still drifts through space. That makes the sky much deeper than it first appears. When you look up, you're not only looking across distance, you're looking into the past. A distant galaxy does not appear to you as it exists right now, but as it once existed when its light began its long journey. The universe is not a photograph taken all at once. It is more like an enormous book, with each page of light sent from a different moment in time. Some pages are recent, some pages are ancient. Some pages come from a time when galaxies were still young, when Earth had no forests, no blue oceans like today, and no human beings looking upward and wondering who they are. And because light needs time to travel, there is a natural limit to what we can see. The part we call the observable universe is not necessarily the entire universe. It is only the region whose light has had enough time to reach us. Imagine you are standing in a dark room, holding only a small candle in your hand. The candlelight creates a warm circle of brightness around you. Inside that circle, you can see the table, the chair, the nearest wall, and maybe dust moving very slowly through the air. But outside that circle of light, the room still continues. You do not see it, not because it is not there, but because your light has not touched it yet. The observable universe is like that circle of light. It is the part of reality from which light, electromagnetic waves, and physical signals can carry information to us. Beyond that circle of light, there may still be space, still galaxies, still regions we will never see directly. Not because they certainly do not exist, but because light from there has not reached us, or may never reach us in a way we can receive. This thought is very simple, but also overwhelming. It says that what we call the universe in everyday life may only be our region of the universe, the region visible from our position in space and time. It is like a person standing on the seashore at night, seeing only the part of the water lit by the moon, then wondering how many waves are quietly moving beyond that glow. We do not know the whole ocean for certain. We only know the region the light allows us to see, and it is precisely that limit that makes the question of another version of you feel wider. If reality is larger than the part we observe, if space has regions so distant that light cannot tell us their stories, then could there be, somewhere in that unreachable depth, conditions, histories, and structures different from everything we know? In cosmology, there is an important idea called cosmic inflation. According to this model, during a very early stage after the birth of the universe, which we call the Big Bang, space may have expanded extremely rapidly during an incredibly short period of time. This idea is used to explain why the universe, on very large scales, appears so uniform, why its flatness is so close to what we observe, and why later structures such as galaxies could have begun from very tiny fluctuations in the early period. But even here, science keeps a necessary humility. Scientists are not certain what happened before inflation, and they are not completely certain what drove that stage. Some models suggest that inflation may not have happened only once in our region of the universe, but may have produced other regions of space, like distant cosmic bubbles within a larger reality. But that is still an area of scientific speculation that is very difficult to test directly. Imagine a pot of water slowly boiling. On the surface, bubbles appear in different places. Each bubble has its own surface, its own shape, and its own lifetime. This is only an image to help us feel the idea, not an exact description of all cosmology. Some ways of thinking about the multiverse imagine that our universe may be like one bubble in a larger process, while other bubbles, if they exist, may lie beyond observation. They may have physical conditions like ours, or different from ours. Perhaps the constants of nature there are slightly different. Perhaps the history of structure formation there follows another direction. But we have to say this very clearly. At present, this idea is not like having taken a photograph of another universe. It is a possibility within certain theoretical models, not a fact placed on the table like a stone we can hold in our hand. That carefulness does not make the story less wondrous. On the contrary, it makes the story more trustworthy and deeper. Something does not have to be stated with absolute certainty in order to move us. Some large questions are not meant to be closed with a quick answer, but to expand the way we see ourselves. The multiverse in cosmology is like a very distant horizon. We cannot step toward it right away, but simply knowing that the horizon exists changes the way we look at the small room of our life. We realize that the part of reality we live inside may be only one chapter, not the entire book. And if the observable universe is one chapter, then the question of me also begins to become more humble. Who am I if I'm only looking at reality from a very small point during a very short time through very limited senses? In everyday life, human beings often confuse "I do not see it" with "it is not there." But cosmology teaches us that some things cannot be seen because they are too far away, too ancient, too faint, or beyond the observational horizon. A child standing by a window at night may think the whole world is only the yard lit by the streetlight, but the world does not end at the edge of the darkness. It continues into unseen roads, silent houses, distant fields, other cities, and oceans that have no name in the child's imagination. Human beings, before the universe, are like that child. We have telescopes, satellites, mathematics, maps of the cosmic microwave background, and centuries of observation. And yet we're still standing beside a window. That window is much wider than it once was, but it's still a window. From that window, we know the universe has a very long history. We know galaxies are moving away from one another in an expanding universe. We know distant light carries signs from the young age of the universe. We know the matter we can touch is only a small part of the universe's total energy content, while much of the rest involves dark matter and dark energy, which are still not fully understood. We know so much compared with our ancestors, who once sat around fires and looked at the sky with the naked eye. But it is exactly what we already know that makes what we do not know shine even more brightly. The more we expand the map, the more we see that the edge of the map is farther away. The more we understand one part of the universe, the more we see that the rest refuses to shrink down to fit the human mind. And within that vastness, the idea of another version of you should not be told as something certain, but it can be listened to as a symbolic question. If space may be wider than the region we see, if time may be deeper than the memories we hold, if cosmological models allow us to think about other regions of reality, then we can ask ourselves, is my existence only one possibility that became real in this region of the universe? Could it be that somewhere else, under the same laws or nearly the same laws, matter arranged itself in different ways? Could there be another history where the initial conditions were slightly different, and from that came very different stories? These questions do not lead us to a certain conclusion, but they widen the mind like a room with more windows opened. However, to serve the deepest question of this video, we do not need to turn the multiverse into a loud stage. We do not need to say that there is definitely another you walking down some distant street at the edge of reality. The more beautiful question is this: if all of reality is wider than what we know, then why do we believe our present life is simple and ordinary? Maybe it is not ordinary at all. Maybe your presence here, with this body, this voice, this history, this pain, the people who once loved you and the people you once loved, is an extremely rare convergence of countless conditions. A line of ancestors stretching across thousands of years, a planet at the right distance from a star, an atmosphere gentle enough for lungs to breathe, an age late enough after the first generations of stars for heavy elements to exist in blood and bone, a chain of choices and randomness that brought you to this exact moment, hearing these words. When we think this way, the question of the multiverse does not pull us away from ourselves. It brings us closer to ourselves, but in a larger way. You are not only a person with a name, an age, a job, and memories. You're also a very small cosmic event, but a real one. The atoms in your body were once formed through the processes of stars and the universe. Your breath is connected to the atmosphere of a planet. Your heartbeat takes place in an expanding universe. Your mind asks questions about other universes using the very matter of this universe. There is something very quiet and very miraculous here. The universe, inside you, is wondering about itself. And when the universe wonders whether there are other versions of you, it is also asking about the power of possibility, randomness, and consciousness. Perhaps you have felt this before while standing in front of the ocean, or on an empty road, or sitting alone in a room at midnight. Suddenly your life feels both very familiar and very strange. You know your name, you know the things you have done, you know the house you live in. But if the mind steps back just a little, everything begins to seem far from inevitable. Why this life and not another life? Why this road and not that road? Why were you born into this family, in this age, on this planet, in this universe? That question can make a person feel small, but if it is told in a gentle voice, it can also bring a very deep peace. Because when we see ourselves as small, our daily worries become less absolute. A sadness is still a sadness, but it is no longer the whole sky. A mistake still needs to be learned from, but it no longer defines the entire soul. The observable universe is like an enormous library of light, where every galaxy is a distant book. But whether that library has walls, we do not yet know. Whether there are shelves beyond the visible region, we do not yet know. Whether there are other rooms in the cosmic library, we do not yet know. And that not knowing is not an empty space where we can place anything we want to believe. It is where we learn to respect the truth. We know what has been observed. We know what is a model. We know what is a hypothesis. We know what is only reflection. A truly mysterious scientific story is not one that ignores the boundary between evidence and imagination. It is a story that knows where that boundary lies, then stands right beside it and looks into the darkness with humility. That humility is what keeps the question of another version of you from becoming cheap. If we say for certain that another you is living another life, we may make the listener curious for a few seconds, but then we lose the truth. But if we say that science has not proven this, while cosmology allows us to think about the limits of what can be observed, the possibility of other regions of reality, and the smallness of human experience, then the question becomes much deeper. It is no longer a game of imagination. It becomes a mirror. In that mirror we see ourselves standing between two abysses, one abyss of space too vast to comprehend, and one abyss of lives never lived. Try placing yourself in a very specific moment. A person sits on the porch near the end of life, watching the sunset sink behind the trees. They no longer need to prove anything to anyone. The great days of struggle have receded. Old faces rise and dissolve in memory. That person looks at the sky and knows that light is travelling across enormous distances to reach their aging eyes. Then they think of the roads not taken, not with bitterness, but with a kind of wonder. If there is another universe, another distant region, another branch of life, perhaps there is a version there who lived differently. But even if there is not, the simple fact that they once had the possibility of becoming many people is already strange. In that person's heart, the past is no longer a courtroom. It becomes a sky, wide, dark, holding a few stars, and quiet enough to forgive. The story of a universe wider than what we see also helps us understand something very ordinary. Every human being lives from only one point of observation. You do not see life through everyone's eyes. You see it through eyes shaped by your childhood, your family, your wounds, the things you were taught, the things you once lost, and the things you once feared. Just as the observable universe depends on the observer's position in space, your psychological life also has its own observational horizon. Some things lie in the bright region of memory. Some things remain at the edge, appearing only in dreams. Some possibilities you have not seen because fear covered them. Some versions of you have not stepped out because circumstances have not allowed them to. So when we speak about regions of the universe beyond sight, we're also speaking gently about the regions within a human being that have not yet been illuminated. This is a very important point. The question, is there somewhere else, does not apply only to outer space. It also applies to the inner life. Is there somewhere else inside you? Is there a part of you that was forgotten, buried under responsibility, silent for years because life was too busy, too exhausting, and too full of things to endure? Is there a version of you who still wants to learn, to love, to create, to tell the truth, to rest, and to live not only to complete tasks, but to feel that they exist? The multiverse, even if it has not been proven as an observable reality, can still become a very beautiful metaphor. Reality may be wider than the lit region, and a human being may also be wider than the role they are used to carrying. But we still return to the truth. In science, multiverse models are debated because some forms are very difficult, or perhaps impossible, to test directly. The farther an idea moves away from observation, the more cautiously it needs to be spoken. Some scientists see the multiverse as a possible consequence of theories with scientific motivation, such as certain models of inflation. Others criticize it by saying that if there is no way to test it, it can easily slide more toward philosophy than experimental science. Both attitudes exist and both help us remain honest. We can let imagination rise, but we should not cut the anchor line of evidence. We can step to the edge of what is known, but we should not pretend that the darkness beyond has been fully mapped. When we keep that balance, the story becomes very fitting for a quiet night. We do not need to excite the listener with certainty. We only need to invite them to reflect. If the observable universe is only the part whose light has reached us, then how much of our life is also only the part of light that memory allows us to see? If there are regions of space beyond the horizon, how many possibilities of the self have also existed beyond the horizon of awareness? And if cosmological models are still debating other regions of reality, then perhaps in personal life, we should also be humble before the people we might become. There are stages when you think you are finished, But no, perhaps only an old horizon has closed and another region of light has not yet appeared. Listen to this sentence slowly. What you do not see does not necessarily mean it does not exist, but it also should not be believed with certainty just because you want it to exist. Between those two extremes is the land of maturity. That is where we know how to hope without deceiving ourselves, how to be amazed without abandoning reason, how to open our hearts to mystery while still respecting science. And in that land, the question of another version of you becomes very beautiful, not because it gives you an easy answer, but because it makes you see your life as a rare branch within a reality too large to hold. You're no longer only a person who made a few mistakes, missed a few chances, and passed through a few seasons of pain. You're a small point of light within the candle circle of the observable universe, aware of the surrounding darkness and still continuing to breathe. And here, the question begins to become even stranger. Because if reality may be wider than what our eyes can see, if the quantum world may be deeper than our intuition, if the observable universe is only the circle of light that has had time to reach us, then what troubles us is no longer only this. Is there another universe? The real question is, if there is, what makes this version of me be me? Is it only this body? Or this memory? Is it this name? Or the quiet stream of consciousness that feels continuous from long ago until today? If somewhere there is a person like you, but that person does not remember what you remember, does not love the people you love, and does not carry the wounds you carry, is that person truly you, or only a distant branch of possibility? That question will take us from the sky back into the mind. Because perhaps the deepest mystery is not how many unseen regions the universe has. The deepest mystery is why, among all those possibilities, you feel that there is an I sitting at the center of experience. An I that remembers the past. An I that fears loss. An I that was once a child but is now different. An I that can imagine another version of itself yet is still bound to one body, one history, and one single stream of memory. However vast the universe may be, that question returns very close. What makes you you? Before we go deeper into that, let the image of the dark room and the candle remain for a little while longer. You are standing inside the small circle of light. Out there may be many other rooms, or there may only be darkness stretching on. You do not know yet, but inside this circle of light, you have your hand, you have your breath, you have the stories you have lived, you have one very small but real chance to treat the present version of yourself more gently. If there are other universes, they are too far for you to touch. If there are other versions, they are too faint for you to hold. But this version, in this branch, under this candlelight, is still here. And perhaps, in the middle of the entire vast universe, that is the only place where healing can begin. If the universe may be wider than the circle of light we can observe, then now the question begins to turn inward, toward the place that is closest to us and also the hardest to understand, yourself. Suppose that somewhere, in a distant branch of reality, there is a person with your face, your voice, your fingerprints, and even a childhood almost like yours. Is that person truly you? Or is that person only someone who is very much like you, a shadow born from the same starting point, then slowly drifting away from you through different memories? This question may sound gentle, but it actually touches one of the deepest mysteries of human life. What makes me remain me through the years? Think of yourself in an old photograph. Maybe it is a picture from childhood, when your face did not yet have the features it has now, and your eyes still looked at life with a different kind of wonder. That body is no longer the same as the body you have now. Many cells have changed. The voice has changed. The way of thinking has changed. The fears have changed too. Some things you once thought you could never overcome are now only a faded patch of memory. Some people who once mattered deeply are now only names that occasionally pass through your mind. And yet, when you look at that photograph, you still say, "That is me." Not because everything has stayed the same, but because there is an invisible thread connecting the child in the picture to the person looking at it. That thread is woven from memory, familiarity, a name, family stories, old wounds, things once loved, and a quiet stream of consciousness saying, "I was there, and I am still here, but that thread is more fragile than we imagine. If someone exactly like you at 20 years old were placed into a different life, it would take only a few years for that person to begin drifting away from you. At first, the differences might be small. You drink coffee in the morning while that person drinks tea. You stay in a familiar job while that person moves into a different career. You meet a new friend on an ordinary afternoon while that person does not. You go through a loss in the family while that person does not go through that loss, or goes through another one. Those small things are like drops of water falling into two different streams. When they first separate, the two streams are still very close. But after many rainy seasons, many bends, many rocks, and many valleys, they are no longer the same stream. They may come from the same mountain, but they now carry two different sounds. That is why another version of you, if such a person exists, cannot remain you forever in a simple way. That person may begin from a form very close to yours, but new memories will make that person different. A memory is not just a short film stored in the brain, it is part of how we understand ourselves. When you remember a time you were betrayed, that memory may make you more careful. When you remember someone who was kind to you during a hard time, that memory may make you believe kindness is still real. When you remember a major mistake, that memory may turn into humility. When you remember a small success that no one else noticed, that memory may become a quiet source of courage. If another version of you does not have those memories, or has completely different memories, then a different self will form inside that person. The face may look the same, but the inner sky has entered another season. There is a very simple way to feel this. Imagine two people with the same name, born on the same day, raised in the same neighbourhood, and sharing early years that are strangely similar. But at the age of 20, one chooses to stay close to family, while the other moves very far away. The one who stays learns to live with familiar duties, to care for loved ones, and to move through repeated days that are still full of meaning. The one who leaves learns loneliness, learns how to take care of themselves, and learns how to begin again in unfamiliar rooms. 10 years later, the two meet again. They may still recognise the same old smile. But the way they see the world has changed. The one who stayed may understand the endurance of family more deeply. The one who left may understand freedom more deeply, and also the cost of freedom. No one is better. No one is the real version while the other is the wrong version. They are simply two different stories written from an opening chapter that was almost the same. So you are not only the body. The body is the house of experience, but it is not the whole of experience. You are also not only a name. A name can be written on documents and spoken by others for many years, but if memory disappears completely, if emotional connections are broken, that name may remain while the sense of self becomes unfamiliar. You're also not only your job, your age, or your outward roles. A person can retire, change careers, or lose an old title, and still feel that an I continues. That I does not live in one single object. It is more like a piece of music played by many instruments at once. The body, the brain, memory, habits, emotions, language, relationships, and the story you tell about your life. Neuroscience has not found a small box in the brain labelled the self, as if it were a simple object. Instead, brain research shows that many different networks are involved when human beings remember personal experiences, think about themselves, imagine the future, or place themselves inside a story. One of the networks often mentioned is the default mode network, which is connected to inward-focused processes such as remembering personal experiences, thinking about oneself, imagining other people, and imagining things that have not happened. This becomes very beautiful if we tell it in gentler language. When you lie still and do not have to do anything urgent, the mind does not fully turn off. It often returns to your stories. It moves through memory, connects the past with the future, tries to imagine who you have been, who you are, and who you might become. In silence, the brain is still weaving the feeling of one continuous person. But that feeling of continuity is not always solid like stone. It is like a lamp kept burning by many different sources of oil. If memory is damaged, a person may feel fragmented. If a very large event happens, someone may say, "Since that day, I have not been myself anymore." That sentence is not only poetic, it describes a psychological truth. A major loss, an illness, a collapse, or a decision that changes an entire life can make the old story of the self too small to hold the present. Then a person has to learn how to retell their life. They cannot erase the old chapter, but they must find a way to write a new one and still recognize themselves inside it. The self, therefore, is both enduring and soft. It keeps us connected to the past, but it also changes so we can keep living. If another version of you turns into another life, that person will also have a different autobiographical story. Maybe that person will remember a room you have never entered. Maybe that person will love someone you do not know. Maybe that person will fear something you do not fear, and remain calm before something that once made you tremble. Imagine that person at 50 years old. The face may still have familiar features, but in that person's memory, there are mornings you do not have, trips you did not take, sentences you did not hear, acts of forgiveness you never needed to offer, and wounds you do not carry. When that person looks in the mirror, they will also see a very real eye, but that eye does not belong to you. It belongs to that person's life. It is like two books with the same first page, but from the second chapter onward, they separate and can no longer be read as one book. This makes the question of the self feel deep and almost sacred. In many cultural traditions, people use the word soul to name the deepest, most continuous, most difficult to grasp part of themselves. It is the part that seems impossible to fully describe through weight, height, or outward appearance. Science, with more cautious language, often speaks about the brain, memory, perception, emotion, self-awareness, and the model of the self. These two languages are not exactly the same. One often speaks through symbol and inner feeling, the other speaks through observation, experiment, and models. But both touch the same deeply human experience. We are not only objects that exist, we are people who feel that we exist. We have an inside. We have an I that is listening, remembering, hurting, hoping, and wondering why it is itself. And here we can ask a question very slowly. If the entire outward form of you were copied, but your memories were not copied, would that be you? Most of us would feel that it would not. A person with your face who does not remember your childhood, does not recognize your loved ones, does not understand why an old song softens your heart, and does not know why a certain season makes you sad, would only be someone who looks like you. But if your memories were copied up to a certain point, and that person then continued living in another life, the question becomes harder at first. In the first minute, that person might say, I am you. That person remembers what you remember. That person has the same feeling about the past. But as soon as life begins to flow, after just 1 hour, 1 day, 1 year, the two streams of consciousness no longer match. You hear these words. That person hears another sound. You feel this night. That person has another night. And from there, the two eyes begin to separate. Philosophers have created many thought experiments about personal identity. If memory, personality, beliefs, desires, and psychological continuity were transferred somewhere else, what would make up the original person? If there were two copies that both held psychological continuity with you, could both of them be you? Those questions may sound distant, but they help us see something very real. Identity is not as simple as a label placed on a body. It has to do with continuity, but that continuity is not easy to define. It has to do with memory, but memory can also be wrong, faded, selective, or retold in many ways. It has to do with the body, but the body is constantly changing. It has to do with relationships because other people also hold part of our story. Your mother remembers you in one way, an old friend remembers you in another way, someone who once loved you remembers you in another way. You remember yourself in still another way. The self does not live only inside a sealed box. It also lives in the eyes of those who once called your name. Think of a person who loses memory because of illness or old age. That person may no longer clearly remember the events that shaped their life, but loved ones still recognize them through the way they laugh, the way they hold a hand, a small habit when hearing rain, or a softening emotion when hearing a familiar voice. This shows that the human self does not live only in one single memory, but in a wider pattern of body, emotion, relationship, and history. Even so, when autobiographical memory fades, the feeling of a continuous life can also be affected. This is very deep and also very tender. We need memory not only to know what we have done, but to feel that we have passed through time as one person. Memory is the bridge. If that bridge is damaged, the two shores of past and present may feel farther apart. So if another version of you has different memories, that person no longer stands on the same bridge as you. That person has a bridge of their own, connecting their own shores. Maybe they still have the first few planks in common with you, but the rest has been built from different days. This makes the image of another you both sad and beautiful at once. Sad because if that person is real, you cannot simply claim that person as yourself. Beautiful because it shows that every life, even if it is only a branch of possibility, has its own dignity. Another version is not just your secondary shadow. If that person lives long enough, they will be a complete human being in their own branch, with things that cannot be reduced to a copy. We can see this through a very ordinary example. Two identical twins may have similar faces, grow up in the same house, and hear the same family stories. But then one becomes a doctor, seeing the fragility of the human body every day. The other becomes a carpenter, touching wood every day, measuring the straightness of a board, smelling sawdust, and creating tables that will remain in other people's homes for many years. After 30 years, even if they still look alike in photographs, they will have two different inner worlds. One may look at their hands and remember long hospital shifts. The other may look at their hands and remember thousands of tiny cuts in wood. One learns how to speak with patients' families, the other learns how to listen to the sound of wood being sanded. The body may look similar, the roots may be similar, but life has passed through them in two separate ways. If real twins in real life can become that deeply different, then another version of you in a distant branch cannot be seen as a simple copy. This also helps us hurt less when we think about the versions we never lived. The person you might have become is not necessarily a more perfect person. That person would carry different limits, not no limits at all. If you had chosen another career, maybe you would have had a different joy, but also a different exhaustion. If you had chosen another love, maybe you would have had different mornings, but also different misunderstandings. If you had lived somewhere else, maybe the window would have looked out at another sky, but inside you would still have had to learn how to live with yourself. Human beings often imagine that another version has escaped everything we have had to endure. But in truth, if that person is human, that person also has to carry a life with weight. That person would also have evenings when they do not know whether they chose correctly. That person would also have a self that needs comfort. Maybe this is the gentlest truth. No version of you is exempt from being human. In any branch, if that person has consciousness, that person must also face time, the body, loss, choice, and the question of who they are. This helps us feel less jealous of the roads we did not take. We can remember them, learn from them, but we do not need to kneel before them as if they were certainly better. This life, this branch, this body, this memory, imperfect as they may be, are still where yourself truly formed. You're not only someone who missed other lives, you're someone who has lived this life long enough to have a depth that no imagined version can replace. Another strange thing is that the self does not only look back at the past, it also projects itself into the future. You can imagine yourself older, more peaceful, healthier, or more tired. You can imagine a version of yourself 5 years from now if you begin caring for yourself today. You can imagine another version if you continue carrying the same burden without rest. The human brain has the ability to mentally travel through time, to remember the past and imagine the future. That ability helps us plan, regret, hope, and change. If the past contains versions that never formed, then the future contains versions that have not arrived yet. And here, the question, who am I, becomes the question, which version of myself am I nurturing? This is very practical, even when told in a mysterious atmosphere. If every day you speak to yourself with harshness, a more exhausted version will grow. If every day you give your body a little more care, a steadier version may gradually appear. If you keep repeating silence before the things that need to be said, a more closed-off version will form. If you practice telling the truth with a kinder voice, a freer version may open their eyes. We do not need a parallel universe to see the branches of the self growing. They grow in habits, they grow in the way we react, they grow in the small sentences we say every day, they grow in whether we dare to look at old pain without hating ourselves. Maybe that is why the question, what makes you you, should not be answered too quickly. If we say, you are the body, we forget memory. If we say, you are memory, we forget the body and the emotions that have no words. If we say, you are the soul, we express a deep feeling but do not explain how the brain, memory and relationships create experience. If we say, "You're only the brain," we may forget the sacred subjective feeling of being alive from the inside. Perhaps the right answer for a quiet night is this: you are a continuity created from many layers. You are a changing body. You are memory telling itself again. You are the relationships that have touched you. You are habits repeated until they become character. You are consciousness waking up in each moment and saying, "This is my life." And if there is another version of you, that person will also have a continuity of their own. When the two streams are still near the branching point, they may be almost parallel. But then one day, that person goes through an event you do not go through. Someone appears in that person's life who does not appear in yours. A sentence wounds that person that you never heard. A joy softens that person that you never had. After that, the person begins to react differently. That person chooses differently not only because the circumstances are different, but because the inside has changed. Each new memory is like a grain of sand falling onto a scale. One grain seems insignificant, but thousands of grains make the scale tilt. Eventually, that person can no longer be you in the full sense. That person is a branch relative of the self, a distant kin of possibility. Thinking of it this way, we can return to our own life with more compassion. You have changed so much. Maybe there was a version of you who was more hot-tempered, a version who feared being left behind, a version who trusted people too quickly, a version who did not know how to say no, a version who endured too long because they thought they had no choice. Those versions no longer control all of you, but they have not completely disappeared. They live in your reactions, in your dreams, in the way you protect yourself. If you hate them, you are hating part of the history that tried to help you survive. If you hold them with understanding, you can begin to integrate the scattered parts of yourself. A mature self is not a self that has never broken. It is a self that learns how to hold the broken pieces without letting them keep cutting it forever. This is where science and a spiritual feeling meet very gently. Science says autobiographical memory helps us maintain a sense of self across time. Philosophy says personal identity may involve psychological continuity, including memory, intention, belief, personality, and mental connections. Spirituality says there is a deep part within a person that witnesses every change. No matter which language we use, all three are moving around the same fire. Human beings want to understand why they still feel like themselves, even though everything inside them is always changing. That fire is not easy to pick up and prove, but anyone who has lived long enough can feel it. You have changed, but some kind of familiarity has continued with you. You're no longer the child in the photograph, but when you look into that child's eyes, you still hear a very quiet call from within. If one day you feel far away from yourself, maybe it is not because the self has disappeared. Maybe the old story about who you are no longer fits. Maybe you once thought you had to be strong forever, but now you need rest. Maybe you once thought you were only the person who cared for others, but now a part of you wants to be cared for. Maybe you once thought every crossroads had closed, but inside, there is still a small door. When we ask, "Who am I?" the answer does not have to be a fixed definition. It can be an act of listening. I am the one who went through this. I am the one who is still learning. I am the one who once chose that way because at the time that was all I knew. I am the one who can now choose a little more gently. And if, in some reality, there is a person like you who turned in another direction, perhaps the important thing is not to prove that person exists. The important thing is to notice why the thought of that person touches you. Is it because you still regret a dream? Is it because you want to live more honestly? Is it because you feel that roles, duties, or fear have made your life too narrow? Is it because you want to know that your life could have been different, and therefore the rest of your life does not have to repeat itself exactly as it has been? Another version, whether real or imagined, can become a visitor carrying a message. That person does not come to say you were wrong. That person comes to ask, what part of you has not yet been heard? That question can enter sleep very softly, not like a knife of regret, but like a small candle placed near the bed. You do not need to stay awake all night to solve the entire mystery of the self. You only need to see that you are not as simple as a name. You are many layers of time breathing together. You are someone who has lived one real branch of life among countless branches that can be imagined. You are someone who may never meet other versions, but can still learn from their image. You are someone who cannot return to every crossroads, but can still soften the way you continue walking. And in that softness, identity is no longer a prison. It becomes a river. The river has a source, bends, muddy places, clear places, moments when it flows over rocks, and moments when it opens into a plain. But it is still the river, still moving. So what makes you you? Perhaps it is not one single thing. Not only the face in the mirror, not only the memories in your head, not only the soul in a sense we cannot measure. Not only the brain in a cold and dry sense. You are the meeting place of all these things. You are a body with a history. You are a mind that knows how to tell a story. You are the memories that stayed and the memories that faded. You are the people who changed you. You are the choices that became habits. You are the things that hurt you but also made you deeper. You are the stream of consciousness feeling itself through time. And if another version of you is real, that person will also be a meeting place of their own, a river of their own, a candle of their own in the vast darkness of possibility. Maybe, when we understand it this way, we no longer need to fear the question of another self. We do not need to see that person as proof that we are not good enough. We also do not need to see that person as a certain miracle somewhere out there. We only need to let that person stand at the edge of imagination, as a reminder that the self is not an unmoving block of stone. The self is a process. It is born every day from the way we remember, the way we love, the way we react, the way we forgive, and the way we speak to ourselves when no one else can hear. And if the self is a process, then even in this branch of life, there is still a small space to soften, to heal, and to become a version that carries less heaviness in the heart. In this quiet darkness, you can place a hand on your chest, feel the steady rhythm of your heartbeat, and remember that every great question eventually returns to one very small breath. Maybe the universe has regions we have never seen. Maybe reality has more branches than our intuition allows. Maybe another version of you is a possibility science cannot yet confirm, or only a very deep shadow in the mind. But this version is here. This version has carried your memories all the way to tonight. This version has lived through days that others could not fully see. This version can still listen, understand, breathe, and become gentler with itself. And perhaps, among all the answers about the self, the gentlest answer is this. You are the one who has been here long enough to learn how to love the very stream of life that created you. After moving through the question of what makes you still you, we begin to realize something very strange. The self does not appear only when we are awake. It also quietly steps into dreams, hides inside moments that feel strangely familiar, and sometimes appears through the very hard-to-explain feeling that we have already lived through this moment before. On some nights, you close your eyes in a familiar room, and then the mind takes you to a place your body has never been. You walk through a long hallway filled with pale blue light. You know clearly that the house in the dream is not your house, but in the dream, you feel as if you have lived there for many years. You see an old table, a strange window frame, a yard where leaves are falling very slowly. Then someone calls your name in a voice you have never heard in real life. When you wake up, all the details dissolve quickly, like steam on glass, but the feeling remains. It is not only the feeling of I just had a dream, it is the feeling of I was just someone else. Dreams like that can easily make a person wonder. While we sleep, does the mind touch another life? Is there another version of us living somewhere? And is a dream only a very small crack where two streams of consciousness briefly pass across each other? That question is beautiful, but we need to hold it with two very gentle hands. One hand is mystery, because dreams can sometimes feel so deep and so real that it is hard to see them as random images. The other hand is honesty, because science has not proven that dreams are evidence of parallel universes or another life. Dreams may be the brain processing memories, emotions, worries, desires, fears, and fragments of experience mixed together during the night. But even if that is true, it does not make dreams any less wondrous. Because if the brain can use the broken pieces of this life to build the feeling of another life, then there are more hidden versions inside you than you may have imagined. Remember that when you sleep, the mind does not disappear. It changes the way it is present. During certain stages of sleep, especially rapid eye movement sleep, brain activity becomes very vivid, and people often have dreams filled with images and emotions, sometimes stranger than ordinary life. The body lies still, the room remains quiet, but inside, the brain can open a very wide stage. On that stage, someone who has died can return. A city you have never visited can appear as a familiar place. An old mistake can be replayed with a different face. A decision that never happened can be briefly lived in a hazy few minutes. It is not necessarily a physical doorway into another reality, but it is a psychological doorway into the region where memory and possibility blend together. Some dreams make us feel braver. In real life, you may have stayed silent for many years about something that hurt you, but in a dream, you stand before that person and say something very calmly. Not with anger, not with trembling, just with the truth. When you wake up, the room is still the same, the past is not changed, but something small moves inside your heart. It is as if another version of you has tried to do what the waking version has not yet been able to do. Other dreams make us feel more vulnerable. You see yourself returning to an old house, looking for someone who is no longer there, calling again and again while no one answers. When you wake up, you realize that pain still has a room inside you. The dream does not take you to a parallel universe, but it takes you to a part of yourself that was once locked away. There are also dreams that seem very ordinary, yet leave behind a strange echo. You dream that you are living a very quiet life in a small town beside a cold sea. Every morning you open a bookstore, wipe dust from the windowsill, make a pot of tea and talk with neighbours you have never met in real life. There is no magic, no grand scene, no dazzling mystery. Just another life, slow and simple. When you wake up, you do not remember the name of the town, and you do not remember the faces of those people, but you remember the feeling of belonging there. That feeling can soften your heart for the rest of the day. It is like a postcard from a life with no address. And even though science may say that the brain is combining memories, images, emotions and desires into a story, we can still ask a very deep question. Why did the mind create that exact life? What is it trying to show you? Maybe the dream is introducing you to a need that has not been heard. The person who dreams of living by the sea may not need another universe. Maybe they need more quiet in this life. The person who dreams of standing on a stage may not truly want to become an artist in another world. Maybe they need to be seen, to speak, to be recognized. The person who dreams of walking through a forest while holding a child's hand may be meeting the young part of themselves, the part that once needed protection but did not receive enough of it. Dreams, if we listen carefully, are not always prophecies. Often, they are letters from the inner life. They write in symbols because during the day we're too busy to listen in clear words. This helps us keep a balance between science and mystery. We do not need to say that dreams are certain proof of another version of ourselves existing somewhere. But we also do not need to reduce dreams to meaningless images. Dreams may be where the brain organizes emotions. They may be where memories are reactivated and mixed with imagination. They may be where daytime worries try to change shape. They may be where different parts of the self are brought onto the stage to speak to one another. Seen this way, a dream about another life becomes a deeply personal document about the possibilities within you. It does not prove that somewhere out there a copy of you is living in your place. But it does prove that inside you, the imagination is strong enough to feel lives that were never lived. Then there is another experience, one that does not come while you sleep, but happens while you are awake. You walk into a room for the first time, but suddenly everything feels familiar in a strange and difficult to explain way. The light on the wall, the sound of a spoon touching a cup, the smell of old wood, the way someone turns their head, all of it feels as if it has happened before. You know you have never been here. You know reason says this is the first time. But a very deep part of the brain whispers, I have seen this scene before. That is the feeling of déjà vu, or the feeling of already seen. It usually lasts only a few seconds, then fades away. But in those few seconds, reality seems to have two layers overlapping. One layer of the present that is happening now, and one layer of a past that cannot be found. This feeling can be very strong. Someone may be walking through a small shop, then suddenly stop in front of a shelf of pottery because they feel that this exact image has appeared somewhere before. Not just the shelf, the yellow light, the person standing on the left, the sound of the door opening behind them, the sentence about to be spoken. For one moment, they feel as if they know what will happen next. Then everything returns to normal. No cosmic door opens, no message falls from the sky. Only a slight chill moves down the back, and one small question remains. What was that? Science often explains déjà vu through mechanisms related to memory, the recognition of familiarity, and the way the brain processes information. Some explanations suggest that the brain may recognize a similarity between the present moment and an old memory we cannot clearly recall. For example, you enter a room arranged almost like the home of a relative from your childhood. You do not clearly remember that old memory, but the brain recognizes a familiar pattern. As a result, you feel that you have known this place before, even though you cannot name the memory. Another explanation sees déjà vu as a very brief mismatch between the feeling of familiarity and the checking process of memory. One part of the brain signals, "This is familiar," while another part cannot find a specific memory to confirm it. So you stand between two conflicting signals, new and old, strange and familiar. In most cases, a passing feeling of déjà vu is a normal experience and nothing to fear. It is like a strange echo in the brain's memory system. But if someone has very frequent and intense episodes of déjà vu, especially along with unusual fear, loss of awareness, or other neurological signs, medicine may consider it something that should be checked, because déjà vu can sometimes appear in certain conditions related to the temporal lobe of the brain. This is not said to make the listener anxious, but to remain honest. The same experience can feel mysterious in subjective awareness, and still have a neurological basis in the way the brain works. We do not need to choose one side and deny the other. We can say, this is something the brain does, and it is also something the soul feels. What is worth noticing is that déjà vu touches the theme of another version of you very precisely. Because in that moment you're not truly living another life, but you feel as if the present has a copy inside memory. Time suddenly folds. The moment happening now no longer feels completely new. It feels like a page that has been read before, but the words on the page cannot be clearly remembered. That feeling is very close to our question, have I been here before in some branch? Has another version of me passed through this scene before me? Science does not claim that, but emotionally, déjà vu can make people feel that reality is not flat. It seems to have depth, echoes, and familiar layers that cannot be explained right away. Imagine someone driving on a suburban road in the late afternoon. Trees line both sides, sunlight leans across the windshield, and the radio is playing an old song. Suddenly, the person feels that this scene has happened before, not just driving down a similar road. The entire moment, the light, the sound, the cool air in the car, and the thought rising in their mind. For a few seconds, the person feels as if life is touching a groove that already exists. Then the feeling disappears. The car keeps moving. The road is still there. But the person becomes quieter. For one very brief moment, they felt that this life was not completely unfamiliar to some part deep within them. If dreams are the stage of hidden versions, then déjà vu is like a very small crack in the feeling of time. It is not large enough for us to step through, but it is enough for us to see that memory and the present are not always completely separate. The brain does not record the world like a perfect camera. It builds experience by combining present sensation with prediction, memory, familiarity, and meaning. So sometimes the present can be covered by a layer of familiarity in the wrong place. That is not an error that makes the experience worthless. On the contrary, it shows how delicately the self is created in every moment. We feel that reality is certain, but that feeling of certainty is also a subtle product of the brain. And when we understand this, we can return to dreams with a new respect. In dreams, the brain is not bound by the same kind of logical checking that it uses when we're awake. It can place someone who has died inside a present-day room. It can make you young again, make you old, make you fly, make you walk through a city that does not exist on any map. It can merge the faces of three people into one. It can make you cry over something that never happened. But the emotion in the dream can still be real. Your heart can beat faster. Your tears can be real when you wake up. The relief or sadness after a dream can follow you for the entire morning. So what is real in a dream? Maybe not the event, maybe the emotion, maybe the psychological message, maybe the sign that there is a version inside you that wants to be heard. A person who has lost someone they love may dream that this person returns, sits on the edge of the bed, and says something very ordinary like, "Have you eaten?" or "It is cold outside." When they wake up, they know it was a dream, but they still feel visited. Science may say that the memory of the loved one was activated during sleep, that grief was being processed by the brain, and that the image of the person who died was reconstructed from memory traces. But to the heart, that dream can be a moment of meeting again. There is no need to turn it into supernatural proof. There is also no need to strip it of its sacredness. Some experiences can be explained by the brain and still be held in the heart as a gift. Both can be true at once. Similarly, if you dream of another version of yourself, that person may not be a copy in a parallel universe. That person may be the unlived part of you, a version who dares to leave, a version who dares to stay, a version who is forgiven, a version who is still angry, a version who no longer tries to prove anything, a version who is allowed to rest, a version who knows how to say I am tired without feeling guilty. In waking life, we often have to live according to roles. The father, the mother, the wife, the husband, the worker, the caregiver, the strong one, the one who's always fine. But in dreams, those roles can fall away. The compressed parts of ourselves can step out as images, and when we meet them, we're not necessarily meeting someone from another universe. We may be meeting rooms inside ourselves. There is something very important here. The mind does not only remember the past, it also simulates possibility. When you dream, the brain can combine old memories with new situations and create scenarios that have never happened. This may be one reason dreams sometimes feel like an emotional laboratory. You may experience the feeling of loss before a real loss happens. You may face fear in symbolic form. You may meet someone again to say what was never said. You may see yourself living another life in order to recognize a forgotten need. In this sense, dreams do not take you out of your life. They take you into a deeper region of your life, where possibilities are tested through images before they become action. Maybe that is why many people wake up after a strange dream and feel that the whole day has slightly changed colour. They still go to work, drink water, open doors, and reply to messages. But inside there is an echo that does not fade right away. A dream about another house may make them wonder why they have drifted so far from the feeling of home. A dream about an old lover may not mean they want to return, but that a part of them still needs to close a story. A dream about a lost child may not be a prophecy, but an image of old loneliness. A dream about themselves in old age, sitting alone by a window, may be a reminder to slow down before time goes too far. If we know how to listen, dreams do not ask us to believe blindly. They invite us into a conversation with ourselves. Déjà vu can also be listened to in that way. When the feeling of "this has happened before" passes through, instead of quickly concluding that we have touched another universe, we can pause and ask, what in this moment feels familiar to me? Is the light like an old afternoon? Is the smell of rain like the house of my childhood? Does the way someone laughs remind me of someone I have lost? Is the present situation repeating an emotional pattern from my life? Sometimes déjà vu is only a passing neurological phenomenon, but sometimes that very feeling makes us realize that the mind is always comparing the present with the deep storehouse of memory underneath. You never meet a moment in complete emptiness. You meet it with your entire inner history. This fits the question of another version of you very well, because every present person always carries many old selves inside. When you walk into a room, it is not only the person of today who walks in. The child who once feared abandonment may also walk in. The young person who was once rejected may also walk in. The person who was once deeply loved may also walk in. The person who once lost faith may also walk in. So the same moment can be felt in many layers. An ordinary sentence can hurt you more than it should because it touches an old version. A kind look can bring tears to your eyes because it touches the part that once lacked gentleness. Outer reality has one shape, but inner reality has many times layered on top of one another. Maybe that is why some dreams seem to come from another life, but may actually come from other layers of time within you. In a dream, you may find yourself standing in an old classroom, while your current age is still present. You're both an adult and a child. You know you have lived through many years, but you're still being called to the board like long ago. That dream does not need the multiverse to become meaningful. It shows that inside you, the past has not completely passed. It can still enter the present when you're tired, when you need to understand an old fear again, or when the mind is trying to stitch together a wound that was forgotten. Other versions of you may not be in distant galaxies. They may be in layers of memory that have not yet been reconciled, but do not let that make the story too dry. There is real beauty in not fully knowing what dreams are. Science has understood many things about sleep stages, memory, and brain activity. But the question of why we dream in that particular way, why one image appears instead of another, and why a dream can change our mood for an entire day still has many open regions. That open region is where this gentle story can breathe. We do not need to fill it with certainty. We only need to stand before it the way we stand before a lake at night, knowing the water is real, knowing the moonlight is real, but also knowing that the image in the water is not the actual moon in the sky. Dreams are like that. They reflect, they distort, they blur the boundary, but sometimes through that reflection we see something we could not see during the day. If you have ever woken up and clearly remembered the feeling that you had another life, try not to push it away too quickly. Ask yourself gently, in that dream, what kind of person was I? Was I freer? Was I lonelier? Was I searching for someone? Was I hiding from something? Was I living more slowly or running endlessly without stopping? Was I loved? Did I say something I could not say in real life? These questions are not meant to turn the dream into a prophecy. They help you hear the part of the mind that is speaking through symbols. Maybe the version in the dream does not live in another universe, but that person lives inside your possibilities. That person reveals an emotion, a fear, or a desire that is still breathing. And if you have ever experienced déjà vu, let it be a small bell, not absolute proof. In those few seconds, the brain shows you that familiarity can appear without a clear memory. That makes us humble toward our own experience. We often say, I remember, I know, I am sure, but the brain can create a feeling of certainty even when the source is unclear. This does not make the self fake. It only shows that the self is made from mechanisms more delicate than we imagine. You're not a perfect narrator of your life. You're a narrator who is still learning, with memories that are sometimes bright, sometimes blurred, sometimes connected in the wrong way, and sometimes healed through the way they are retold. From this point of view, both dreams and déjà vu serve one message. The present version of you does not stand alone. It is surrounded by possibilities, memories, echoes, and images of other selves. There are selves that lived in the past. There are selves that have not yet arrived in the future. There are selves that appear only in dreams. There are selves that show up in a passing feeling of familiarity when you walk through a strange place. There does not necessarily need to be another universe for these versions to matter. They already matter because they help you understand yourself more deeply. They tell us that a human being is not only a fixed point in the present, but a sky with many layers of clouds. Imagine your mind as a large house at night. During the day you use only a few rooms: the room of work, the room of responsibility, the room of schedule, the room of communication. But when you sleep, other hallways open. One room holds childhood. One room holds what has not been forgiven. One room holds dreams that were once set aside. One room holds a more peaceful version of you, sitting beside the window and waiting for you to find them. Déjà vu is like walking through a new hallway and suddenly smelling the wood of an old room. You do not know why it is familiar, but the familiarity is real. The mind is not a simple house. It has basements, attics, locked doors, half-open doors, and windows that look out toward unnamed possibilities. From here, the original question becomes softer. Is there another version of you living another life? Science may not be able to answer with certainty, but every night, in dreams, the mind still lets you meet versions that were never lived. Every passing moment of déjà vu still lets the brain give you the feeling that the present has a very faint double. Every time you remember a road not taken, memory still builds a self that might have become real. These things do not prove the multiverse, but they do prove that within human experience, another life is not a foreign idea. It is something we have felt many times through dreams, regret, intuition, and unnamed familiarity. And perhaps the most precious thing is not trying to escape this life in order to meet another one. The most precious thing is bringing the gentle messages from those dreams and echoes back into the present life. If a dream shows you that you are tired, rest a little. If it shows you that you are looking for home, create a small sense of belonging right here in this room. If it shows you that you are speaking the truth, try saying one small true sentence tomorrow. If déjà vu makes a moment feel fragile, live that moment more slowly. The versions in dreams do not need to live in your place. They only need to remind you that there are still many parts of you that have not been heard. Tonight, as you slowly drift towards sleep, maybe the mind will open some window again. Maybe you will dream, or maybe you will remember nothing at all. Maybe a stranger will appear and still feel familiar. Maybe you will walk down a road you have never walked in real life. Maybe you will become a lighter version of yourself, or meet an old version who needs forgiveness. Whatever happens, remember that a dream does not need to be fully decoded in order to have value. Sometimes, if it simply makes you gentler with yourself, it has already completed a quiet task. And if, in a dream, you briefly glimpse another life, let it pass like moonlight on the surface of water. Beautiful, deep, hard to hold, but not something you need to own. When you wake up, you will still return to this branch of life, this room, this body, this memory, these people, these questions. But maybe you will return with a little more understanding. Inside you is a space wider than your daytime schedule. You're not only the person doing the things that need to be done. You're also the person who dreams, remembers, and connects the present with possibilities that were never lived. And even if dreams do not prove that another version of you exists in a distant universe, they still help you feel that the present self is something very deep. It is not made only from what happened. It is also made from what might have happened, what you fear, what you hope for, and what the mind quietly tries to live in the dark. Maybe that is why we can close this reflection with one small piece. If another version of you exists, that person may be very far beyond all evidence. If not, that person may still exist as a shadow in a dream, a reminder in déjà vu, an unlived part of the soul. Either way, that person does not come to pull you away from this life. That person comes to help you see this life more deeply, to help you see that every night of sleep is not only a loss of consciousness, but an entry into a region where the mind weaves memory and possibility together again. To help you see that every strange familiar moment is not something to fear, but a sign that the reality inside you has more layers than you thought. And to help you see that the version breathing here, listening here, slowly relaxing into this night, is still the only version you can care for with gentleness right now. If dreams and moments of déjà vu give us the feeling that there are many unlived lives inside us, then when we wake up, real life brings us back to something simpler, but just as powerful. Sometimes another version of you is not in some distant universe at all. Sometimes that version begins with a very small choice on an ordinary morning, a phone call made instead of postponed again. An apology spoken before pride has time to close the door, a health checkup scheduled instead of telling yourself, later. A small class started when age has made you think it is too late. A slow walk under a cold sky, turning off the screen a little earlier, choosing not to answer with anger in the exact moment when you could hurt someone else. These things are so small they do not look like destiny. But years later, when people look back, they often realize it was exactly those small things that quietly opened another life. We often imagine that life only changes because of major events, a long trip, a wedding, a breakup, a new job, a new home, a great loss. But in truth, many turning points are disguised as small actions we barely notice. Someone begins writing a few lines every night to understand their own heart, and after a year, they are no longer swept away by every emotion the way they once were. Someone decides to call an old friend after years of silence, and from that call, a relationship is saved before it is too late. Someone who has always ignored the tiredness in their body finally makes a health checkup appointment, and because of that, they learn to care for themselves sooner. Someone learns a new skill for 15 minutes every day, quietly, without showing anyone, and 5 years later, they have become someone their old self would barely recognize. No light flashes across the sky. No multiverse door opens. There is only one small choice repeated long enough to become a road. There is a very deep truth in life. Human beings do not change only through moments of realization, but through actions small enough to be repeated. A big thought can move us for one night, but a small habit is what quietly rewrites the shape of our days. You may hear a beautiful sentence about living more slowly, but if tomorrow morning you still rush forward the same way, that sentence will slowly dissolve like mist. On the other hand, if every morning you sit still for 1 minute before picking up your phone, if every night you ask yourself, what made me tired today? If every day you walk just a little farther, those changes may be so small that no one applauds. But inside, another version of you is learning how to breathe. Imagine a man who has become used to living inside his own silence. For many years, he believed that if he loved someone, he could simply keep it in his heart. That if he owed someone an apology, surely they would understand. That if something made him sad, there was no need to say it. That way of living once helped him stay standing. It was like a thick coat during a long winter. But one day, sitting in the kitchen and looking at the empty chair across from him, he realizes that words left unspoken do not always find their own way to the person who needs to hear them. He picks up the phone. He does not give a grand speech. He simply says, "I have been thinking about what happened. I'm sorry I stayed silent back then." That call may not fix everything. The person on the other end may still be hurt. They may only go quiet for a few seconds. But from that moment on, another branch of his life begins. Not the branch where the past disappears, but the branch where he no longer lets silence decide everything for him. A small choice may not change the whole world, but it changes the way you are present in the world. And when the way you are present changes, the things around you begin to respond differently too. Someone who has always said, "I am fine," even when they are deeply tired, if one day they learn to say, "I need to rest today," they are not only saying a different sentence, they are teaching the body that exhaustion is allowed to have a voice. They are teaching the people around them that kindness does not mean always enduring. They are teaching the deepest part of themselves that they too are someone who needs care. 5 years later, that version may live more lightly, not because life has stopped being hard, but because they no longer abandon themselves inside every hard thing. Some small choices are connected to the body, and they are often the humblest ones. The body does not speak in philosophy. It speaks through back pain, restless sleep, short breath, a racing heart, cold hands, and long-lasting fatigue. Many people move through years as if the body were only a machine meant to serve every responsibility. They postpone health checkups, postpone rest, postpone drinking water, postpone stepping outside, even postpone admitting that they are no longer 20 years old. But one day, maybe very quietly, they decide to listen. They make an appointment, they walk for 10 minutes, they sleep a little earlier, they eat more slowly, they do not see it as a revolution. They simply see it as a way of returning to their first home, the body. And the body, when listened to, sometimes answers with a very simple kind of peace. Not every illness can be avoided. Not every pain disappears because of good habits. We should not tell the story of life as if everyone can fully control their health through willpower. That is not true, and it is not gentle. But caring for the body is still one of the most honest ways to tell the present version of yourself, "I am still here with you." A routine checkup can help detect a problem early. A gentle walk can remind the nervous system that the world is not only pressure. A respected night of sleep can make the mind less sharp-edged the next day. A nourishing meal may not create a miracle, but it is a small vote you cast for your future. If there is another version of you 5 years from now, that person is not created only by great dreams. That person is created by the evenings when you choose to stop before you're completely drained. By the times you do not swallow all the hurt but speak it in a calm voice. By the days when you learn something new even though you feel slower than other people. By the times when you choose to see a doctor instead of hiding from fear. By the moments when you place a hand on your chest and realize that you do not need to become everyone. You do not need to live every life. You only need to stop being cruel to the one life you have. There was a woman who once believed that her age had passed the stage of beginning. She had a stable job, a familiar rhythm of life and responsibilities that had hardened into shape. But inside her, there was still one very small desire: to learn how to paint. Not for an exhibition, not to become an artist, simply because ever since she was young she had loved watercolour and light on paper. She postponed it for years because she thought she was too busy, too old, too clumsy, too late. Then one afternoon she bought a small box of paints. The first painting was not beautiful. The second one was not beautiful either, but after a few months she began to see the world differently. The sky was no longer just the sky. It had grey blue, silver blue, pale blue near the horizon. A cup on the table was no longer only an object. It had shadow, reflection, and shape. She was not only learning how to paint, She was learning how to see again. And another version of her appeared quietly, without leaving her old life, but living inside that same life with softer eyes. A person does not need to change their name, their house, or their entire fate in order to meet a new self. Sometimes they only need to change the way they see. When someone who has always seen themselves as someone too late begins to say, "I can still learn," a small door opens. When someone who has always seen themselves as a failure begins to say, "I survived many difficult things," the voice of their life story changes. When someone who has always asked, "Well, why am I not a better version?" begins to ask, "What does the present version need in order to hurt less?" They are no longer a person on trial. They become someone being listened to. This is very important in our journey. The question of another version of yourself should not make you reject the present version. It should help you understand that the self is an open process. You're not a block of stone that has already been fully carved. You're a garden. Some areas have dried out. Some areas were once forgotten. Some trees have grown old. Some seeds are still beneath the ground. Not every seed will sprout, and that is all right. But if there is still a little moist soil, a little light, a little care, something can still grow. A person at 70 can still learn how to apologize. A person at 50 can still learn how to rest. A person at 40 can still begin again with a healthier habit. A person at 30 can still stop living as if every old mistake were a life sentence. Life is not endlessly soft, but it is softer than we think. The science of habits says something very close to this experience. When a behavior is placed in a repeated context and performed enough times, it can gradually become more automatic. At first, you have to remember. Later, the body remembers for you. At first, walking, journaling, learning a skill, calling a loved one, or turning off the lights earlier may require a great deal of willpower. But if it is connected to a familiar cue, such as after breakfast, before sleep, after making tea, or after taking a shower, it has a chance to become part of your rhythm of life. Then change is no longer a huge battle every day. It becomes a small path walked so many times that the grass lies down, and when that path appears, the new version of you no longer feels so far away. However, habits do not need to be told as cold discipline. In this story, habit is a way of loving yourself through repetition, not forcing yourself to become someone perfect, not turning life into a list of goals, but choosing one small action kind enough to repeat. A glass of water in the morning, one page of a book before sleep, a message checking in on someone you care about, standing up to stretch your back once during the day, 1 minute of slow breathing before answering a difficult sentence. One sentence to yourself, "I am trying," and that is already worth recognizing. Those small things may sound very ordinary beside theories of the multiverse, but it is precisely inside ordinary life that the nearest branches of the future are born. Think of someone who once had the habit of reacting with anger. Every time an old wound was touched, they spoke words as sharp as knives. Later, they regretted it, but regret was not enough to change the road. Then one day, they began one very small action. Before answering, they placed their feet on the floor, took one breath, and asked themselves, "What am I trying to protect?" At first, they still failed many times. There were moments when anger moved faster than breath, but every now and then, a pause appeared. Just 1 second. Then 2 seconds. Then one answer that hurt someone else a little less. Months later, their family could feel the change before they could even name it. Another version had begun living in that same house, not because the universe split into branches, but because they learned how to create a new branch in their own reaction. Or think of someone who's not dared to learn anything new for many years because they are afraid they are slow. They watch younger people do everything faster and think, "My time has passed." But then they choose to learn one very small skill, one piece each day. Maybe it is a language, image editing, playing a musical instrument, using a work tool, or cooking a healthier meal. At first, the awkwardness embarrasses them, but little by little, the brain realizes that not knowing is not shameful. Not knowing is only the starting point. Their self, which had been trapped inside the sentence, "I cannot learn anymore," begins to loosen. And when a self loosens, the world gains another path. That is a very quiet kind of rebirth. No grand ritual is needed. No mystical light is needed, only the repetition of small choices. A new version usually does not appear in one night. It comes like dawn, so slowly that it is hard to notice while it is happening, but clear when you look back. One day, you suddenly see that you no longer react the old way. One day, you realize that an old pain no longer controls every decision. One day, you feel your body a little lighter because you have cared for it longer. One day, you find yourself telling the truth without shaking as much as before. One day, you realize you have become the person you once needed to meet. This does not mean everything is in our hands. Life contains illness, loss, economic circumstances, family responsibilities, injustice, and limits that no one can overcome simply by thinking positive. A gentle story should not deny the weight of real life, but even within limits, human beings often still have small spaces where they can choose how to be present. You may not be able to choose the storm, but sometimes you can choose where to place a lamp. You may not be able to choose the past, but you can choose not to turn the past into a whip that strikes you every night. You may not be able to choose your age, but you can choose to treat age as another season of life, not as a room locked from the outside. Human freedom is sometimes not as large as we dream, but it is also not as small as fear tells us. So if you have ever lain awake thinking about the version who chose differently, try turning the question a little. Instead of only asking, how is that person living? Ask, what is creating the version of me 5 years from now today? This question does not push you into regret. It brings you back to the small but real power of the present. If tonight you sleep a little earlier, tomorrow may feel less blurred. If tomorrow you say one kinder sentence to yourself, a tight place inside you may soften. If this week you schedule something you have been postponing, a practical door may open. If this month you learn something new, a future stream may begin to shift. None of these things guarantees a perfect life, but they are ways of telling the universe that in this branch, you are still participating in the formation of yourself. There is great comfort in that. You do not need to live every possible life. No one can. No one can both stay and leave in the same life. No one can choose every career, love every person, live in every city, say every sentence that should have been said, avoid every mistake, and keep every opportunity. Human life is always the art of losing possibilities. Every choice opens one road and closes many others, but that does not make your life poorer. It gives your life a shape. A song becomes a song because it does not play every note at once. A story becomes a story because it chooses one line to follow. A life becomes a life because it moves through time in specific steps. You do not need to become every version. You only need to learn not to abandon the version who is living. Maybe the present version of you is tired. Maybe there have been many years when you tried for too long and no one fully saw it. Maybe you have blamed yourself for old choices. Maybe you have looked at a road not taken and believed your happiness was left there. But perhaps, even in this branch of life, there are still seeds that have not sprouted. Not a happiness as bright as the movies. Maybe only the peace of drinking tea without feeling guilty for resting. Maybe the ability to say no without trembling. Maybe a morning when you wake up and do not immediately hate the new day. Maybe a relationship that is spoken into again with honesty. Maybe a body cared for late but still grateful. These things are not small. They are the soft branches of the future. If, in earlier parts, we looked at other versions through quantum mechanics, through the universe, through memory, and through dreams, then here we meet the closest other version, the person you are slowly becoming. That person is not fully here yet. That person is not living in a distant galaxy. That person exists in the way you choose after hearing a story, after waking from a dream, after remembering an old crossroads. That person may be a little gentler than you are today, maybe a little braver, maybe a little better at resting, maybe no longer needing to prove strength by silently enduring everything. And that person does not demand that you change your entire life all at once. That person only needs you to open a small crack in the door. A small crack in the door can be writing a letter you do not need to send. In that letter, you tell the past version of yourself that they did the best they could with what they knew then. You tell the future version that you are trying to send them a life with less weight. A small crack in the door can be clearing one corner of the room so the mind feels less cluttered. A small crack in the door can be telling someone, I miss you. A small crack in the door can be learning to breathe out longer than you breathe in when anxiety arrives. A small crack in the door can be accepting that today you did not do much, but still not calling yourself useless. Those cracks, when repeated, can become pathways, and a pathway, when walked long enough, can become a life. Some people may ask, If every change begins so small, why is it so hard for human beings to change? Perhaps because a part of us clings to what is familiar, even when the familiar hurts us. The familiar feels safe because it can be predicted. An unhealthy old relationship can still feel familiar. A habit of self-blame can still feel familiar. A schedule that drains you can still feel familiar. A fear can still feel like a room where you know every crack in the wall. Stepping out of the familiar, even towards something better, can still make the nervous system cautious. That is why change needs gentleness. Not rushing into a new life as if destroying the whole house, but opening one window, changing one light bulb, cleaning one small corner, so the house inside you can slowly learn that new light is not dangerous. This is especially important for people who have passed through many years of responsibility. When we are young, we may believe change means running quickly toward a shining image. But the longer we live, the more we understand that lasting change often has a humbler shape. It is like learning to speak to yourself in a voice that no longer insults you, like understanding that rest is not laziness, like realizing that health is not something to care about only after it is lost, like calling a loved one before silence becomes a distance you no longer know how to cross, like not waiting until everything is perfect before beginning to live more honestly. Another version of you does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes that person arrives through an appointment, a pair of walking shoes, a blank page, an "I am sorry," or an "I need help." And if you are hearing these words while tired, let this part not become pressure. You do not need to make a plan tonight to change your whole life. You do not need to become the best, strongest, brightest version of yourself right now. There are nights when the gentlest thing is simply to stop fighting with yourself. There are nights when the new version of you begins not with a major action, but with allowing the body to sink into bed and saying, "Today was enough. Tomorrow, if I have the strength, I will choose one small thing. Just one thing. Something possible. Something that does not frighten me so much that I give up. Something small enough not to need display, but real enough to send a signal to the future. So perhaps the secret is not only whether another copy of you exists somewhere. The secret is this. Even in this life, you have already been many people. A child who once looked at the world with eyes that did not yet know loss. A young person who once believed there was so much time. Someone who was afraid but kept going. Someone who hoped, then became disappointed, then learned how to hope in smaller ways. Someone who made mistakes and still deserves to learn again. Someone who stayed silent for too long and can now speak more slowly, more truthfully. And tonight, as you listen to this story, maybe you are gently becoming another version too. Not instantly more perfect, but less cruel to yourself. If there is a multiverse out there, it is too far for our hands to touch. If there are quantum branches, they are too deep for ordinary life to step through like a door. If there are other versions, they may forever remain questions. But in this branch of life, there are small choices you can touch. Not to prove that you have lived correctly, not to erase everything that once hurt you, but to tell the present version of yourself, we can still care for each other. We can still walk more slowly. We can still learn a gentler sentence. We can still open a small window for the future. And maybe, many years from now, someone who is you will look back on this night, not remembering every word, but remembering that there was a moment when they began to treat their life as something worth cherishing. If everything we have moved through tonight leads back to one place, perhaps that place is not at the edge of the universe, and it is not behind some secret door. It is right here, in the very quiet moment when you ask yourself, if there truly is another version of me living another life, does that person ever remember me? That question sounds almost impossible to answer, but it has a strange power. It turns regret in another direction. Before this, we often looked at another version of ourselves as the person who had what we missed. That person said the words we did not say. That person left when we stayed. That person stayed when we left. That person was braver, or more peaceful, or freer in our imagination. But if that person also has a heart, a memory, and a private stream of consciousness, then maybe that person is also looking toward us with the same gentle sadness, asking, somewhere, Is there another version of me who lived the life I did not dare to choose? Just by turning the question that way, everything suddenly becomes softer. The other version is no longer a perfect shadow standing above us for comparison. That person becomes another human being in possibility, also with silent nights, also with unspoken words, also with doors that have closed behind them. If that person chose the road you once missed, maybe that person also paid a price you have never seen. If that person went to the city you once dreamed of, maybe that person also lived through lonely winters there. If that person loved someone you once lost, maybe that person also learned the painful lessons that love carried with it. If that person followed the dream you set aside, maybe that person also had days of exhaustion, confusion, and wondering whether they had traded away too much. Another life, if it is truly lived, cannot have only light without shadow. It must have its own weather too. So perhaps what we call another version should not be seen as a lost paradise. It is only another branch of the human condition. And the human condition, no matter which branch it is in, still has to move through limits, time, the body, memory, loss, desire, and the question of who one is. A person may live in a more beautiful house and still feel empty on some afternoon. A person may have a different career and still remember a road not taken. A person may have said "I love you" at the right time and still have other words they did not say soon enough. No branch is free from incompletion. No life is without things beyond reach. If there are countless versions of a human being, perhaps each version carries a longing of its own, a scratch of its own, a question of its own before the darkness of night. Imagine that somewhere you cannot touch, another version of you is sitting beside a window. Outside is a city you have never known. On the table is a different cup, a different book, a different photograph. That person may have chosen what you once missed. That person walked through the door you only stood and watched. But at some age, when the light outside begins to fade, that person also looks at their hands and realizes that time has passed. That person also remembers an old moment, an old decision, someone who turned away from their life. And in one very small opening of consciousness, that person wonders about you, the version who has lived in this room, in this branch, with these pains, these meetings, these lessons. That person may not know your name the way we are saying it now. That person may not have your memories. But like an echo of possibility, that person may also feel that somewhere another life was lived in place of what they did not choose. That thought does not need to be proven in order to have value. It is more like a symbol than a map. It shows us that every road, even the one that seems better, still has its own dark turns. It helps us escape the habit of hurting ourselves with the phrase, "if only." Because "if only" usually shines a light only on the beautiful part of the road not taken. It rarely shows us the potholes, the cold rain, the exhausting months, the misunderstandings, and the quiet losses on that side. When we imagine another life, the mind often skips over the bills that must be paid, the illnesses that must be endured, the difficult conversations and the nights spent alone. But a real life is never only a beautiful scene. A real life is a chain of days with both sunlight and dust, both hands held and hands released, both opportunities opening and doors closing. If another version of you is real, maybe that person is not there to remind you that you were wrong. That person is there in our reflection to remind us that every life is only one part of possibility. You live this life, which means you do not live all the other lives. That person lives that life, which means that person also does not live this one. You lose what that person has, but that person also loses what you have. You may never know what it feels like to live in that person's house, but that person also does not know what it feels like to sit exactly where you are sitting, to pass through the years that made you who you are now, to meet the people who left marks inside you. Maybe you have envied the freedom of an imagined version. But that version, if they knew about you, might envy something very simple in your life. Someone who stayed, a child who called you by a familiar name, a garden you cared for, a friend you grew old with, a pain that taught you compassion. This does not deny what you have lost. Some losses are real, and they should not be covered too quickly with comforting words. Some crossroads still hurt when we look back. Some people leave our lives, and the empty space they leave cannot be filled with philosophy. Some opportunities pass, and no matter how we understand them, they still tighten the heart. But the gentle truth is this: the pain of the road not taken does not mean the road you did take is meaningless. A life may not be the life we once dreamed of, but it still has its own depth. It still has moments only it could have. It still has lessons only it could teach. It still has people who would never have appeared if we had chosen differently. And maybe the imperfect things themselves created a version of you who can understand others more deeply, judge more slowly, and love fragile things more tenderly. Try thinking of your life as a small candle in a very large room. If there are countless branches of life, each branch may be another candle burning in another corner of the darkness. This candle does not need to shine brighter than that one in order to have value. It only needs to burn in its own way. One candle burns near a window, another burns on a wooden table, another burns in a cold room, another burns beside someone crying, another burns beside a half-open book. Each candle lights up only a small area, but within that small area, a life appears. You are the candle in this branch. Another version, if there is one, is a candle somewhere else. No one sees the whole room. No one owns all the light. But every small light is real within its own space. There is a gentle spiritual feeling in that image, but it does not need to leave the truth behind. Spirituality here does not mean claiming certainty about something that cannot yet be tested. Spirituality here is reverence for what exists. It is the feeling that a human life, no matter how ordinary, is not trivial. A person waking up, making tea, caring for a loved one, going to work, coming home, looking at the sky, remembering someone from long ago, breathing through a hard day, learning how to forgive themselves. All of these things may not appear in books about cosmology, but they are ways the universe becomes inner experience inside a living being. If galaxies are the large scale of reality, then a tear, an apology, and a hand placed on a shoulder are also the small scale of reality. And sometimes, that small scale is where meaning becomes clearest. If another version of you is living another life, perhaps that person also does not know for certain whether their life is right. That person may also look into the past with unfinished questions. Maybe that person achieved what you once wanted, but lost a piece you now have. Maybe that person went far away but longs for a familiar home. Maybe that person stayed, but dreams of the road. Maybe that person spoke the truth, but still hurts because of the result. Maybe that person stayed silent and regrets it just like you. When we think this way, we no longer use another version to punish ourselves. We see that person as a distant friend in the dark, also living, also learning, also not knowing everything. And perhaps the strangest thing is that this person might see you as the brave version. While you think you were too cautious, that person may see that you were enduring. While you think you missed something, that person may see that you kept something precious. While you think you lived small, that person may see that you were present in someone else's life in a way no one could replace. We often judge our life by what we do not have, but someone in another branch might see the things we do have, the things we have grown so used to that we no longer recognize them. An ordinary meal, a familiar voice calling your name, a place to return to, a morning habit, someone who still sends a message, a scar that has healed enough to no longer bleed. These things do not look dazzling up close, but if they disappeared, we would realize they had been small stars. Maybe there is someone who once dreamed of becoming a musician, but finally lived a very different life. They did stable work, cared for family, and left the instrument in the corner of the room for many years. Sometimes at night they imagine a version who followed music, stood on stage, heard applause, and lived with sound and travel. But imagine that musician version, after a late performance, returning to a hotel room alone. The applause has ended. The lights have gone out. That person sits on the edge of the bed, remembering another life where they might have been closer to family, might have eaten dinner with their children more often, might have had a home with less movement. No life is absolutely more beautiful. Each life is bright on one side and dark on another. Each life gives one gift and keeps another. Or think of someone who once dreamed of going far away, but finally stayed in their hometown to care for aging parents. Inside them may be a map never travelled, cities known only through photographs, languages never learned in time. They may imagine the version who left as the freer version. But in another imagined branch, the person who left may be standing in the middle of a crowded city, very successful, very busy, and suddenly feel pain when thinking about the afternoons they did not sit beside their parents. The final years of loved ones that were heard about only through phone calls, the hands they did not hold because schedules took their place, Both lives have beauty and pain. Both deserve compassion. And because we cannot live both, human beings need compassion for their choices. This is where the question about another version becomes a healing mirror. It does not tell you to forget what was lost. It also does not tell you to pretend everything is beautiful. It simply invites you to see more widely, to see that the road not taken also has darkness, to see that the road taken also has light, to see that another version is not a perfect God living the life you were supposed to have. That person, if they exist, is also a human being doing what every human being must do, learning how to live with the results of their choices. And when you see this, you can set down part of the burden of comparison. You do not need to win or lose against lives that cannot be verified. You only need to return to the life that is truly in your hands. Maybe the deepest question is not, does that person remember me? But am I remembering myself? Not yourself in the sense of an outward identity, but the present part of you that needs to be seen. For many years, we may remember old people, old opportunities and unlived lives, while forgetting the person breathing inside this body. That person has gone through so much. That person woke up on very hard days. That person continued when they were not sure anyone fully understood them. That person carried old decisions, right and wrong, light and heavy, all the way to tonight. If you keep looking only toward another version, you may forget the version who needs a little compassion right inside you. And perhaps more than any distant version, this version is the one calling you. Listen slowly. Maybe inside you there is a very small voice saying, I tried. I did not know everything. I chose within the circumstances I had. I was afraid. I hoped. I was wrong in some places. I was right in some places. I lost some things. I kept some things. I am not the perfect version, but I am the version who truly lived. That voice is not loud. It does not argue with the universe. It only wants to be acknowledged. And when you acknowledge it, a tense place in the heart may begin to soften. Because finally, the question about other lives no longer pulls you out of the present. It brings you back to a simple truth. This life is also a miracle, even if it does not look like the life you imagined. In one gentle way of seeing it, every living person is an unrepeatable event, not only because the biological structure is unique, but because the entire inner history cannot be recreated in exactly the same way. The people you have met, the days you have passed through, the sentences you have heard, the times you stayed silent, the foods of childhood, the rooms that once held you, the scents that make you remember an old season, all of it creates a structure that belongs only to you. If there is a physical copy somewhere, as soon as that person does not pass through exactly the same chain of experiences, that person is already another story. That makes the present version of you rare. Not rare because you are perfect, but rare because you cannot be replaced. You do not need to be dazzling in order to have value. You only need to be a life stream that cannot be repeated exactly in any other heart. And when we see it this way, gratitude is no longer a slogan. It becomes a way of seeing. Gratitude does not mean being happy about every loss. Gratitude does not mean saying pain does not matter. Gratitude means recognizing that even among incomplete things, this life still contains what has nourished you. Maybe you are grateful for someone who stayed. Maybe you are grateful for someone who left because through that you learned a truth. Maybe you are grateful for an illness because it forced you to listen to your body, even though you never wanted it to happen. Maybe you are grateful for age because it took some things away but gave back the ability to see more deeply. Maybe you're grateful for an old choice, not because it was perfect, but because it led you to people and understandings you could not have reached any other way. If another version of you is somewhere, perhaps that person also needs to learn gratitude, just as you do. That person also needs to learn not to turn the road not taken into an idol. That person also needs to learn that every life has a part left behind. That person also needs to look at their hands, their room, the people around them and say, this is my branch. Not the perfect branch, not the only possible branch, but the branch that is truly burning inside my consciousness. And if we can imagine that person doing this, then we can do it here too. We can look at our own life and say, this is my branch. I have walked through it imperfectly, but I can still place a little gentleness upon it. There is a strange peace in stopping the question of whether your life is the best version, because that question often cannot be answered. Best by what standard? Richer, freer, more loved, less painful, more meaningful, safer, or more honest with yourself? Each standard leads to a different version, and even the version that seems best would have a price we have not seen. Perhaps the healthier question is, in this branch of life, what can I do to live a little more truthfully, a little more kindly, a little more awake? That question does not demand that you relive the entire past. It only opens a small space ahead. It does not turn you into a prisoner of regret. It turns you into the caretaker of the present candle. Let that image of the candle stay a little longer. In the wide darkness, a candle does not need to understand the whole room in order to keep burning. It does not need to compare itself with other candles. It only needs to protect its small flame from the strong wind. Your life is like that too. You do not need to understand the whole multiverse, all of quantum mechanics, or the entire mystery of consciousness in order to know that one peaceful breath has value. You do not need to prove another version is real in order to know that you once had many possibilities. You do not need to find the final answer in order to begin forgiving an old choice. The present candle only needs to be sheltered by a gentler hand. If tonight there is a part of you that still regrets, let it sit beside you. Do not send it away. Regret is not the enemy. It is often a sign that something once mattered. We simply should not let regret become a prison guard. Say to it, I know there are things that did not happen. I know there are doors that closed. I know there is someone who went far away. I know there is some version of me still standing at an old crossroads. But now I need to come back. I need to care for the life that remains. I need to sleep. I need to breathe. I need to let the present not be covered completely by the shadows of what cannot be changed. When you say this, you are not betraying the past. You are giving the past a place to rest. And if somewhere another version of you is truly living, perhaps the most beautiful wish you can send that person is not, I wish I were you. The more beautiful wish is, may you be at peace in your branch. May you learn what you need to learn. May you forgive the things you did not choose. May you also know that somewhere else I am living my branch, clumsy but real, tired but still breathing, shaped by loss but still capable of gentleness. That wish does not need a signal between universes. It is an inner ritual. When you wish peace for the imagined version, you also wish peace for the unlived parts within yourself. You stop turning them into wounds. You turn them into small lights in the distance. Maybe after everything, the question, is there another version of you living another life, is not meant to take us away from this life. It is meant to make this life deeper. When we know life could have been different, we see the present as more fragile. When we see the present as fragile, we can hold it more lightly. When we hold it more lightly, we cling less tightly to regret, compare ourselves less with shadows that cannot be verified, and demand less that we become everything at once. We begin to see that a human life does not need to be absolutely complete in order to be worthy of love. It only needs to be seen with eyes wide enough to hold both gain and loss, both what was chosen and what was left behind, both the present version and the versions lying in the mist. And perhaps, right now, you are becoming the version you will one day thank. Not because tonight you have solved every question, not because you have erased all regret, but because you paused long enough to look at yourself with compassion. Some changes begin like that, not with a loud sound, but with a very small softening inside. A person who once blamed themselves begins to say, back then, that was all I knew. A person who once envied the life they did not live begins to see the value of the life they did live. A person who once searched for another version far away begins to return and care for the version who is here. That return may be one of the most mysterious things about consciousness. After flying through possible universes, we come back to one real breath. So tonight, before you sleep, if you want to keep one image, keep this one. In the wide darkness, there may be countless candles of possibility. Some candles are the lives you did not live. Some are dreams. Some are old memories. Some are future versions that are still very faint. But in front of you, there is one candle that is truly burning. That is the present life. That candle may have leaned in the wind. Its wax may have melted unevenly. Its flame may once have weakened, but it is still bright, and in that small light you can still see your hands, your breath, your room, the things you need to release, the things you need to keep, and the things you can still love. If another version of you is remembering you, perhaps that person does not remember you through memory, but through an echo of possibility. And if you are remembering that person, remember them with gentleness, not self-blame. Let those two figures, you and that person, stand on opposite sides of a river that cannot be crossed. There is no need to call out loudly, no need to explain, only bow to each other in silence. That person lives what they live, you live what you live. Both, whether real or imagined, remind us that human consciousness is very deep. It can hurt because of lives not lived, but it can also heal by returning to the life being lived. And now, as the great question slowly dissolves into the quiet, perhaps the answer is not yes or no. Perhaps the answer is a way of seeing. If there is another version of you, may that person be at peace. If there is not, may that shadow still help you understand yourself more deeply. If the multiverse is only an unproven possibility, it can still open humility. If a dream is only the brain weaving memory, it can still bring a message. If déjà vu is only a feeling of familiarity with the wrong source, it still shows that time inside us has many layers. And if this life is not the perfect life, it is still the only life in which you are truly present to love, to learn, to rest, and to begin again in very small ways. In this branch, you have made it here. In this branch, you have listened to a long story about possibilities, versions, candles, dreams, and unknown universes. In this branch, you still have breath. And maybe that alone is enough to make tonight a little lighter. You do not need to search for a perfect copy of yourself somewhere far away. You do not need to live in place of every possibility. You only need to place a little peace upon the version lying in this darkness. The version who has tried, who has grown tired, who has passed through many crossroads, and who still deserves rest. If there is another you somewhere, let that person live inside the question. As for you, return to this body, this breath, this candle. This is your branch. And in this branch, you can still be gentler with yourself. And here, after the great question has moved through the deep layers of science, the universe, memory, dreams, and the self, perhaps what remains is not an absolutely certain answer. We cannot yet say that somewhere, in another universe, there truly is another version of you living another life. Science has not placed that in our hands as clear evidence. The many worlds interpretation in quantum mechanics is still a profound but debated way of understanding reality. Ideas about the multiverse in cosmology are vast and fascinating, but also very difficult to test directly. Dreams and déjà vu may make us feel as if we have touched another life, but they may also be the way the brain weaves together memory, emotion, and possibilities that have not yet taken shape. But perhaps tonight's journey does not need to end with a yes or a no. Perhaps the true value of this question is that it helps us look more deeply at our own life. If there is another version of you, that person may have chosen what you once missed, but that person would also have unchosen things of their own. That person would also have silent nights, memories that make the heart heavy, doors that have closed, people who have gone far away, and questions that can never be fully answered. And if that person could look toward you, perhaps they would also see that your life has things they could never have. The people you have met, the pain that made you softer, the times when you thought you could not continue but still made it through. The small things that seemed ordinary, yet quietly kept you connected to this life. So perhaps tonight, we do not need to envy another version. We do not need to blame the old version. We do not need to force the present version to be perfect. We only need to understand that this life, even if it is not the only life we can imagine, is still the real life you are inside of. You are the result of countless choices, countless coincidences, countless losses, countless moments of hope, countless silences, and countless times of beginning again. You're not only the things that succeeded, you're also not only the things that went wrong. You are the entire river that has flowed to this moment, carrying silt, hidden rocks, moonlight, and bends that no one can fully see. If there is one thing worth keeping after this journey, it is this. You do not need to live every possible life for your life to have meaning. No one can live every branch of the road. No one can choose every choice. No one can become every version of themselves. But in this branch of life, you can still be gentler with yourself. You can still speak one truer word, rest a little earlier, care for your body a little more, forgive an old version of yourself who once did not know what to do. And from those very small things, another version of you can begin to appear right here in this life, not loudly, not brilliantly, but truly. Maybe tonight, when you close your eyes, your mind will still take you to strange rooms, roads you never walked, and faces that feel familiar though you have never met them. If that happens, let them drift by like moonlight on the surface of water. Do not try to hold on to them. Do not try to explain everything. Let those images remind you that inside a human being, there are more layers than we imagine. There is memory, regret, dreams, possibility, parts that were once forgotten, and parts that are still waiting to be heard. And if somewhere there truly is another version of you, perhaps tonight you no longer need to search for that person. Just send that person a wish for peace. May they live gently in their branch. May they learn what they need to learn. May they also know how to forgive themselves for the roads they did not take. As for you, return to this branch of life, to this breath, to this body, to this room, to the heart that has been through so much and still knows how to listen. Thank you for joining Drift into Quiet Knowing as we move through this question that is both so distant and so close. Now, let the possible universes slowly fade into the soft darkness of the night. Let the other versions rest quietly in the mist of possibility. Let your mind stop searching for any more answers. You have thought deeply enough for tonight. Relax your shoulders, relax your hands, and let your breathing slow down like a small candle burning peacefully in a dark room. Sleep well, sleep deeply, and sleep in peace. And I will see you again on another gentle journey into quiet knowledge.